to future agendas. Do we have anyone here?
We have an update, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
hang on. My script is very different than what it usually is, so there is no manager's update, but I am going to ask for one. Do you have an update for us, Harold?
Yes, Mayor, Council. Council, you all know that as part of our process, I work with the mayor on different issues that we've been talking about, and then the mayor pro tem as well. They requested an update on the conversation regarding the distal toll open space and where we were with the negotiations. What I tell you today, the negotiations are done in terms of not able to move forward with the other party. Amrise has failed to respond to numerous attempts for information. And based on that, in terms of our review and looking at the overall situation, that has inherently led to the best option is not to continue moving forward. Actually, the deal flipped on its head, and it's more advantageous for us to not move forward. So at this point, there's no further negotiations on this distal toll option. My recommendation would be is that we cease negotiations.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring?
Okay, so first of all, do you need a motion from us to halt negotiations with the distal?
Actually, I think the motion would be to no longer consider that as an option.
Okay, so I make a motion that we no longer consider the distal as an option, but I would like to move forward with working with Boulder County on the composting facility at Toll.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring to stop the negotiations with Holcim on Distal and to move forward using the toll property for the compost.
Obviously, these are negotiations, so there's a lot of information I can't share. But what I can say is it's been unresponsive, and based on that, I once again want to reiterate that where we started and where we are today, it's much better for us financially to take this approach.
Thank you. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that was seconded by Councillor McCoy? Okay. So let's have some. I see that all the lights are on the left-hand side. So I just want to remind you that the negotiations were in executive session. So asking for any details on that would be out of order. I'm just going to go right down the line here. Councillor Christ.
City manager, can you tell me when on the schedule we would have a presentation about composting?
Which part of composting?
We had a motion to add it to a future agenda, and it was, this was back in the summer, and we were waiting for the county to have time, but mostly we just want to have a presentation on where we are with composting right now and how we might move forward.
I think at this point we haven't had a commitment from the county, but I'll double check to see if we can get it scheduled, but I don't think they've committed to a date.
I think that might be useful to have before we start talking about toll. So if we could coordinate that to the best of your ability. Thank you.
Councillor McCoy, would you turn your light back on, please?
I just want to explain myself. I think that stopping negotiations is the right thing to do, and I think having a conversation about composting is also the right thing to do, and maybe not necessarily on Tull, but to have a conversation is what I think is critical, and finding out where the county is with that.
Councillor Popkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Peck. Similar, building on the same threads from Councilmember Christ and Councilmember McCoy. Mayor Pro Tem, I was wondering if there was a possibility we could separate this out into two motions, one about the negotiations and then one about Tull, or if you could share more about why you wanted to make sure, like, wanted to direct immediately now to move forward with Tull without kind of having more information on the status of that. And I ask mostly out of ignorance because I wasn't maybe part of those discussions if those are in the past. And I've only seen kind of the most recent proposals that we saw this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would really like for us to move forward, to have a discussion, continue a discussion on a composting facility. I'm okay with separating it out into two motions, stop negotiations with Distal, but I would like to see us continue our efforts with the county on a composting facility.
So just a moment, but your motion was on toll.
So I have
second
stopped
that.
negotiations with Distal, Toll, but move forward with composting facility.
Okay.
I'm good with that. I think I may have said Toll at the beginning. Okay, we can drop that last word.
Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. That was my thing, that last one, because there may be some other conversations.
Yeah.
And so that's my
Sure.
thinking. Okay.
My concern with that is that the county and the city have been working for over a year on this, and those were the two pieces of property that the county and the city, because I rode around with them as well, all over the county in proximity to where we are, and there was no land. So I just want to bring that to your attention. We can talk about it forever, but the reality is we've already looked into that. So so you want to stick with this?
Stop negotiations with Distal, but move forward with a composting facility.
Okay, so that was, okay, we need to vote on an amendment because that was an amendment? No, we don't.
No.
All right, let's vote. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none? Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we are at motions to direct the city manager. Is there anyone that would want to direct the city manager on anything else for future agendas? Seeing none, we're going to move on then to public invited to be heard. Remember that we need your name and address, and the first person on the list is Megan Siqueiros. I'm sure you'll correct me on that.
Hello? Oh, perfect. Well, I've come here before. It's been probably over a year since I've spoken, and the last thing that I think I spoke on was the need for not outsourcing fingerprints because I've been gang stalked. So for some background, I came here and I was gang stalked, and I'm very upset that there aren't processes in places. So because it's affecting a great many people. And I'm just going to let you know that I live at the Zinnia Apartments right now. So I was housed last October, and I've been there for a year. And there's probably about a good quarter to half of the residents that have been gang stalked. Okay. And so it's really easy to sweep it under the rug and say, well, these people have psychosis or these people have addictions. Well, the people that are being affected are the people at the bottom. So we need to start developing these things. It's technology. It's people coming into people's houses. You know, if you're going to have an apartment, then having a fingerprint on there and, as well as a key to be able to get in is a really good idea. But I think that, especially for people that have been gang stalked, I don't think that outsourcing fingerprints is a good idea. Like I said, I used to have a professional job. I was a social worker, and I got a job where I had to have fingerprints that were from a third-party agency. It was not from the police. And when I took those fingerprints that they had live scan and they were put into my email, because all correspondences go through email. Well, when I was gang stalked, All of my records from 2004 to 2017 were taken, including that information. So they're able to, with my vital documents, including my birth certificate and social security number, which have been taken, that they are able to order those documents online and be able to apply it to wherever. So all of my information is everywhere, and these things aren't being developed in the cities or in the counties. I don't need people to be targeted further. I feel like if they are being put in jail, that it is causing more, you would call it recidivism. I would say that it's targeting. You know, it's the same thing as a gang stalker. And the reason that a lot of these people are turning to gang stalking is because they've also been targeted by the law, and they can't get ahead because if you look at the budget, you'll see that you have $7 million in excess, or that you have for a cushion, and people don't have that. Like, if I went to the Boulder County meeting, the Boulder City meeting, 62% of people that use EFA, so I don't know what it is here with the R Center, are struggling from paycheck to paycheck and need help. So we don't have that same kind of cushion, but that is the kind of cushion that is required for people to be able to make it. Now, I know that like a lot of people are saying, well, work is very important, and if you don't have that, but the fact is that people that are working aren't making it either, and we need to be able to have globalized income established. And I understand that while that is a larger issue, I think that for the county to be working on globalized income or a universal income in addition to interactive and skill-based incomes, that okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Howard Morgan.
Howard Morgan. My address is 1932 Amethyst Drive in Longmont. And I'd just like to say that I've been a investor in the airport for now 28 years, and I'm grossly disappointed in the advancements that we've seen in those 28 years. We've seen a negative attitude from the city, the airport management, and for a city of 100,000 people, this airport is very substandard, and it's an embarrassment to see many corporate airplanes coming in here with this facility, having been in the corporate flying business. So I would challenge all of you to go over to Greeley, which is about the same size town, and see what a real airport looks like, and maybe change the attitude here, because there's money to do it through the government, and you only have to pay a nickel on the dollar, which is a great deal. And we go to many airports around the country with a population of less than 10,000 people, have beautiful facilities because they understand what aviation does for them. So on another subject is I hear noise about landing fees. And I'd just like to say the landing fees are a disaster because it won't produce the money that you think it will, because the little airplanes that fly around for fun will avoid the airport like the plague. And and if you do it and then take it off, it'll still be devastating, because it'll take a while for the that to go away. Anyhow, it would kill fuel sales to some extent, and it would devastate the little lady that has the food court there, because the people that go to her food court, that thing, aren't going to be coming if they have to pay a $10 landing fee for a $10 hamburger. Ain't going to happen. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Joseph Friedman?
Good evening, Council. I know you have a lot on your plate, a lot of issues. My name is Joseph Friedman, 5723 Four-Leaf Drive, Longmont. I have a few items regarding the airport, briefly, specifically about landing fees, pattern saturation policy and the VNAP. So in upcoming considerations of landing fees at Vance Brand Airport, I say simply do implement landing fees. Among the general aviation, we have 200 or more touch and go operations going on now, occurring 7 days a week, weather permitting. And about 80% of these of this traffic is from nearby airports and their profit-making flight schools. Landing fees will be a win-win situation. It raises revenue for Vance Brand, which is currently operating at a deficit, and it gives the privilege to the flight schools and the aircraft operators to contribute to the well-being, upkeep, and improvement of the airport that, for all intents and purposes, they now own. The fee structure should not be a token amount. Let us be assertive and not apologetic about a landing fee. Next, I wish to thank Councilman Popkin for his great time and effort into researching a pattern saturation policy. But Matthew, I do need you to consider the number of planes maximum in that policy. In my opinion, 2 planes at a time should be maximum. We often have 4, 5, or even 6 planes during various times of the day, and this type of saturation is already creating a frequent, close proximity barrage of airplanes, and it makes our traffic pattern larger, covering more of the city. So if we're concerned about the safety of the pilots, and many of them are inexperienced, I would very much suggest choosing 2 as the maximum at any time. Now, keep in mind, that whatever number is chosen, it will be voluntary, not mandatory. And will our airport manager enforce the pattern saturation program? Unfortunately, consider the VNAP, in which there is no buy-in by the flight schools and pilots, and voluntary compliance really is an abysmal failure because most of the operators do not have a buy-in to our town of Longmont. Cases in point. Pilots frequently fly over populated areas in rural Boulder County well below 1,000 feet, such as this evening, like about an hour ago, where some of our visitors from our MMA were flying at 600 feet above ground level, not in landing or taking off. This is going above town here. The propeller tip RPMs are not slowed down to decrease noise, and acrobatic patterns and loop-de-loops are in fact performed over populated areas. That's a voluntary program. The real solution would be to prohibit all touch-and-go operations at Vance Brand due to 30 seconds?
Thank you.
Yes?
No?
Okay.
an email.
Thank you.
Kirsten?
The dangers of lead are well known.
Can you give us your name and address again, please?
Kirsten Base, 402 Grant Street.
Thank you.
It is hypocritical for a city to have rules about removing lead from our water or rules about repainting a home with lead paint while allowing the planes to spread lead over the entire city all day long. It has been shown exposure to lead is even worse within 2 miles of the airport where the planes are flying at low altitudes. How can the city promote green spaces as natural protected areas for our wildlife, yet have Golden Ponds, Lake McIntosh, Loggerman Reservoir, and about 4 miles of the Greenway all within the 2-mile radius with the greatest lead contamination? Why spend 12 years repairing the Greenway for residents to use to experience nature and have a quiet retreat, yet have planes that make that impossible and unhealthy? Even worse, though, are the dangers to the school children. For children, there is no safe threshold for lead exposure, and prevention is the single most important way of avoiding lead poisoning. It is impossible for the parents and residents of Longmont to prevent exposure to something released as exhaust into the air above us. Within the most dangerous 2-mile radius of Longmont's airport, there are 7 schools. The ages of the children at these schools include the very young and children in their puberty years, which are the groups shown to be harmed the most by lead contamination. These schools are also below the touch-and-go flight paths. Being in the path increases the lead exposure as well as creates a risk to their safety in the case of airplane failure and crash. While the saturation plan is intended to reduce this risk, allowing 5 planes in a 6-minute circle means that 1 plane is flying low overhead every minute at these schools. Sometimes it's 1 plane every 20 to 30 seconds. That is an insufficient buffer given how many of the planes are being flown by inexperienced pilots in training. In addition, allowing 5 planes in a 6-minute loop creates a constant noise distraction for the students. The voluntary noise abatement procedures are intended to minimize early morning and late evening noise, but that doesn't protect the students during their school day nor during their after-school activities. There are currently no quiet hours for students. After school, many of the students' activities are outdoors. So while the planes are releasing lead fuel particulate matter, the kids are breathing it in as they run cross country or track or play soccer, tennis, golf, football. For each additional plane flown in a saturation plan, or at any point in the day, an additional 18 grams of lead can be released per hour. If 5 planes are allowed in flight, then 90 grams are released per hour. In one 2-hour sports practice, that's 180 grams of lead, a toxin that parents have been told to protect their children from. How can we do that? What I would like to ask the council is why budget money for the airport when it is operating at a loss and is a danger to the city's students as the worst and most widespread noise and lead polluter in Longmont? Why is the airport a higher priority than the students? For their safety, please do not allow 5 planes to drop lead at the same time, and please expedite the transition to unleaded fuel. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Seja? I know I didn't pronounce that correctly at all. Seja.
I'm Ed Seja, 1213 Twin Peaks Circle. I live 1.1 miles.
Ed, can you raise the microphone up?
Yeah.
There you go, thanks.
Do I need to re-identify myself?
No, we got you.
Okay, I'm here to talk about the saturated pattern plan. There is no pattern. The pattern is wherever the Broomfield flight schools want to fly. I've observed this now for months on the ADSB. The proposal is to add a few extra lines to a noise abatement policy that's already known to be impotent and ineffectual in every respect. If the proposal tonight is silly, if not deceptive, it's a politician's ploy designed to appear to be responsive to public concerns without actually doing anything. Please understand, the Airport Advisory Board is a special interest group created by the City of Longmont. The airport manager, Mr. Brown, has a common purpose with that group. Except for one member, Mr. Schilling, on that board, and ex officio non-voting member, Mr. Popkin, they're all part of a so-called airport community in one degree or another. The board is there to protect their financial investments and hobby interests in the airport. They've shown no concern previously for the detriment the airport activities impose on homeowners. Their community has a common purpose, and that purpose is to improve and expand the airport. There's no, read the board's mission statement. They're not elected. They have no public duty. There's no obligation on their part of fairness or impartiality that's imposed on the board by the authority that created it. Their recommendations are self-serving. Let me give you an example. In June 2025, the Airport Advisory Board recommended landing fees to you, but only for aircraft that have a gross weight over 12,500 pounds, which excludes nearly all flight school aircraft, which are the problems, and it excludes 99.3% of all landings at Vance Brand Airport. The present recommendation is for 5 planes. That's the average number of planes that's in the pattern now. It's status quo, which we already know is a problem. Follow the math with me for a second. 5 planes in a pattern. Each plane does a touch and go landing every 5 minutes. That's 12 in an hour. 5 planes times 12 is 60. Thank you.
Email us the rest of it.
I'll send the rest by email.
Thank you. Stephen Miller.
Hi, I'm Stephen Miller, 10594 North 65th Street, Longmont. And I would like to remind people of the article in the Times Call a week or so ago that talked about the Rocky Mountain Airport being the most, having the most safety issues of any airport in the country. And these were all kinds of safety issues. And so I have a real problem when we look at the map and try to figure out where the airplanes that are coming in for touch and goes in the morning, we realize that frequently 10 out of 10 come from other than Vance Brand. Almost no airplane is taking off and landing between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. They all come from someplace else, frequently from Rocky Mountain. So I have a lot of problems with the most dangerous airport in the United States sending their airplanes here to land. I happen to own a field that has had 2 crashes in the past 6 months in my field. Both have engine failures. One was not reported to the airport. In fact, the only reason they found out about it was I called the Times call line to complain about the landings in our field, and they didn't know anything about it, hadn't been reported. Times call line got my number and called me, and then they called their reporters who called me, and I told them there's a plane down. It almost ran into my neighbor's barn. And we had one flip over a fence right down from him a little bit north. So I'm really concerned about these planes being safe planes coming in here. And I'm presuming they all are safety checked because they're supposed to be safety checked by FAA standards. I'm also concerned about the numbers in the array going around the flight pattern. And I agree. I see planes coming in from other than Vance Brand and joining the pattern, and they are really close sometimes. So I also am an advocate of having many fewer, such as 2 planes in the flight pattern. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Steve Altschuler.
Good evening. Steve Altschuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. I know later this evening you're going to be spending a lot of time discussing the budget, and I wanted to just give a little talk about that real quickly. I've said this before, but from 2019 to 2024, that 5-year period, our population went up 2.5%, but the budget went up 22.5%. Also, in the last 2 years, property values have gone up over 40% because our property taxes went up about 40% in the last 2 years. Insurance went up about 40% in the last couple of years. So when you're looking at the budget, well, the other thing is this. When I talk to people, I explain the city of Longmont has no money. The only money the city of Longmont has is the money they take from residents in sales tax, property tax, income tax, and different fees of different sorts. So when you're doing the budget later tonight and any other days after that, please keep in mind that the citizens of Longmont have been charged an obscene amount of money in the last couple of years with different fees and taxes, property taxes, insurance, etc. And if there's a way to give people a break and keep that budget down lower, it'd be ideal if we could actually lower it by even 5%. But please keep in mind that everyone in town is not made of money. And I don't think the economy in Longmont is booming right now. And it'd be really nice if you all would be very careful with how you approve things and take people's budget in mind and not just wantonly take money like crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. John Grunsfeld.
John Grunsfeld, business at 229 Airport Road on the Longmont Airport. And I sent you all a package earlier today that's titled, "Why is the City Council Anti-Airport and as a result Anti-Longmont Economy and Community?" It's a rhetorical question. I actually don't believe that you really are against it, but actions speak louder than words. I really feel like the Longmont City Council and the city should be promoting a welcoming landing field as a gateway to the city of Longmont and the Rocky Mountains. The Longmont Airport contributes substantially to the community and generates $73.6 million in the last economic analysis in total business revenues to the city of Longmont. That's significant. More so, it inspires young people and the citizens of Longmont. You just heard about someone with some very flawed data about lead from aircraft, but some of the aircraft do have lead fuel still. The FAA and the EPA have set 2030 as the deadline to eliminate all lead from aircraft, and most of the lead that's in the air comes from roadsides from 70 years of automotive use of leaded fuel. For the pattern restrictions and for the landing fees, I don't think the city has done a proper cost to benefit analysis of those. I think the city should really look at noise sources overall. I've done 3 noise surveys now, and aircraft noise as far as decibels and frequency ranks no higher than 5 in any places in the city. There are many sources of noise that are considerably louder, and I can't imagine you don't get complaints about some of those noise sources, such as the motorcycles on Main Street, the trains, other things. So I think before you talk about implementing either of those things, you ought to actually do a real cost analysis. The FAA will support that with a Part 150 noise survey to specifically look at the airport. They'll also do another survey for you, a study, which we don't have to pay for, on traffic to analyze whether something like user restrictions would be appropriate. And in fact, you have to ask who controls the airspace around Longmont. We'd like to think that it's our city, our airspace, but in fact, it's just like the federal roads. It's just like state roads. We can't arbitrarily say, well, we're not going to allow more cars on Main Street. It's Longmont's road. Well, it's not. It's a state road. 25, we can't regulate U.S. Interstate 25. It's not in Longmont, but that's irrelevant. We can't suddenly say we're only going to allow 2 cars a minute through there. The FAA will actually help us analyze these issues, both noise and traffic. One of the side effects of putting in a traffic restriction in the pattern is that there will be more overflights over populated areas, and they will be somewhat unregulated because people won't be in a defined pattern. They'll be circling around waiting to get in.
Thank you,
So it's
John.
a safety issue. Thank you.
Edward? Rife, thank you.
Edward Greif, 6024 St. Vrain Road, Longmont. I'd like to address the $74 million number of economic activity the airport contributes to Longmont. If we look at the traffic at the airport, 85% or more of the flights, operations, provide no economic benefit to the community. These planes don't stop here. They don't buy fuel here. They don't even buy a candy bar here. So we're left with 15% of the flights that can provide some sort of economic activity. Most of these are local pilots that live here. So where's this mysterious $74 million coming from? CDOT report says visitor spending is $29 million. That's $557,000 a week of visitor spending that comes to the airport. In 2023, we had 4 planes stay at the airport overnight. I'd say the number's more like $2,900 than $29 million. The report makes a lot of assumptions that make no sense. What Longmont business really relies on the airport? The economic activity is minimal, if anything, and we should do a real study to see if we have any financial benefit from the airport. So who's benefiting from the airport financially? It's the flight schools. They come here, they do their operations, and they leave. What do we get from that? We get pollution, disruption, and safety issues. They pay nothing. As a taxpayer, I pay to use the golf course, I pay to use the rec center. I pay taxes here. They're getting rich at our expense, and at the same time doing a number on our quality of life. It makes no sense. We all have seen the recent articles about how unsafe Rocky Mountain Airport is, rated the worst in the country. So what do they do to make it more safe? They send all their bad behavior to Longmont and make us less safe. We've had 3 or 4 crashes in the last few months that involve, what happens when we have one that involves people on the ground? Everybody knows what's been happening over the last 18 months to 2 years, and we've had no support. The majority of the AAB and airport management have had zero concern, zero compassion for the community. They've done nothing to help. And now the AAB presents a 5-plane saturation policy. That's what's happening now. That's no change. 2 seems like the correct number. On top of that, it's voluntary, just like the VNAP is voluntary. And none of the flight schools pay any attention to it. They come here, fly anywhere they want, starting at sunrise until late in the evening. There's no oversight at this airport. Has anyone even talked to the FAA? Let's stop taking FAA money and take back the airport. We need change in this lovely community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria Wasson.
Hello, my name is Maria Wasson. I live at 10594 North 65th Street. And we are just outside of the flight pattern. One would not know that living where we live. Planes begin at 5:30 in the morning. When the weather is good, pilots fly nonstop over our farm. Most planes in the pattern, 1 out of 8, 2 out of 9, 0 out of 4. I look at it at the app we all now have on average, are not from Vance Brand, yet most of them are from Rocky Mountain, now designated the most dangerous airport in the country. Coming to our airport, the planes fly between producing 60 to 90 decibels. It has decimated my business. I cannot work and teach outside like I used to. This summer, 1 plane landed, crash landing in our field, depositing leaded fuel in our irrigation system. Nobody did anything about it. The pilot left the scene without even waiting for authorities to show up. A couple weeks ago, another plane landed. It wasn't a crash. Apparently, it's called an incident right next to our field, in our neighbor's field, almost hitting their barn. 9:30 at night, knock on the door. Oh, I'm sorry. I just made a landing. And that was not accurately reported to the FAA. It was reported that that plane came down at the end of the runway. We called and said, no, that plane is in our neighbor's field. FAA was astonished. I wonder about that scene. I just wish that all of you could come out and stand where I used to be able to look up at the sky and listen to the birds. Now, all I hear is airplane noise constantly, especially from 5:30 in the morning till 10 in the morning, every single day, except when the weather is inclement, which it has been, which has been quite lovely the last couple of days. Please do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Scott Stewart.
Mayor, members of council, Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. I'd like to speak about the airport. Policy that's being presented tonight is building off a saturation policy from Rifle Airport in Colorado. The challenges at Rifle Airport aren't the same as the challenges at Longmont Airport. Look at the proximity of the airport to the actual community. Two different scenarios. Longmont has a prescribed pattern. I gave you all this map the other day about the prescribed pattern. I actually challenge you guys to find this on the website. It ain't that easy. And if we're asking other pilots to follow this, let's make it a lot easier. Problem, airports don't adhere, aircraft doesn't adhere to the guidelines. Placing an artificial number on the amount of aircraft that are allowed in the pattern only adds confusion. The pattern is half mile to 3/4 mile turn left downwind. The airport has a communication problem. We don't contact or advise operators that fly beyond the guidelines. Who's ever at the airport in the management position should be communicating with those aircraft. They're known aircraft. They're easy to find. Communicate, send them this pattern, let them know that, hey, you're outside the guidelines and it's bugging our community. If you look at the council communications that you guys have, that AAB recommendation, you realize that's not a unanimous recommendation. Two opposed it. Rifle, not a good comparison. There's reference to the AOPA. AOP is an aviation advocacy group. They're never going to say anything bad about the airport or what have you. In the ending of this, you say it's going to be on the AWAS system, the automatic weather observation station. It's basically a phone call. Call into it. Nothing happens. It's been down for months. Review the airport advisory board meetings. Your airport manager has been dancing around the subject trying to fix this for months. That's a danger, for Christmas sake. Pilots coming into this community should be able to use the AWAS system like they do with every other airport in the country. It's been down for months. Get a report from him on that one. If we're going to take anything from the Rifle Airport, let's take something from airport rules. Page 7 from the Rifle, 300.02. Airport director may deny use of the airport to any person in violation of these rules and regulations and or FAA rules. There's something to get from Rifle. Why are we saying we're toothless here? Commercial activity fees. Man, Rifle has fees for everything. They have a gate card fee of $10 and $32 per year. We don't charge our people that. We're looking for money. Let's go ahead and do that. They do have a landing fee, $4.77 per 1,000 pounds. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate seeing everybody else here.
Thanks, Scott. Audrey Dunn. Of course.
Thank you.
Audrey, can you pull that?
Hi, everybody. It's
There you
good
go.
to see you again. It's been a while. First, I want to add something about the airport. I know we've been having a lot of crashes. I think what would be a good idea is to have a air traffic control tower out there, so they can spot planes that are in someone else's blind spot, because that's traffic up there, just like we have here on the ground. So, I think, in my opinion, we need an air traffic control tower out there to help spot the planes that are incoming. They can't see other planes coming toward them or from either side because of blind spots. And when you're in a pilot seat or a passenger seat, you can't turn your head and look both ways like you can in a car, because you're strapped in tight. That's just my opinion. Something to consider. As for the noise, please, everybody, don't complain about the noise. I can't hear it without my hearing aids. I'm deaf. Plus, you get used to it. You need to get used to that noise. Because there's nothing you can do about the noise, really. It's going to keep coming. I used to live in Carmen City with my late father, which was about a half-hour drive from the old Stapleton Airport. I can't hear the plane coming in, but I could hear them taking off. I'm mesmerized by airplanes. My father was a pilot, so I'm fascinated by them. But I'm telling you, don't, please, you need to hear these noise, and you will grow used to it. Because my father, even my grandmother, paternal grandmother, my cousins or aunts, uncles, my dad, grew up in Oregon way out east, out by Fort Morgan. and there were trains going through almost constantly, and you got used to it. You wouldn't even know the train was passing behind you. The trains were out back. Railroad tracks were out and back of that house, and you got used to it. You wouldn't even know the train was going through town. Now Logan is a small town. Used to be anyway. I haven't been out there for a while. But you get used to the noise. You grow used to it. And you need to hear, because my dad's father was killed in a school bus train crash right behind our house in the fog. And there were no railroad crossing, what do you call them? The arms to stop the traffic from crossing the railroad track.
Thank you, Audrey.
Okay.
Seeing no one else on the list, that closes public invited to be heard, and we are moving on to our presentations, special reports and presentations. Tonight we have a proclamation. It's a proclamation designating October 2025 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas about 41% of women and 26% of men experience physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And whereas males who physically abuse their wives also batter children in the household in up to 60% of cases. And whereas every year an estimated 3.3 to 10 million children are exposed to domestic violence in their home, and studies have demonstrated that children exposed to domestic violence and or child abuse are more likely to experience a wide range of adverse physiological and behavioral outcomes. About 16 million women and 11 million men who reported experience intimate violence in their lifetime said they first experienced it before age 18. And whereas women who are killed at their workplaces are more likely to be killed by an intimate partner. And whereas state and local communities need to join together alongside service providers and workplaces to send a clear message that domestic violence is not tolerated in Longmont. And we must ensure support is available for victims of domestic violence and their children. Now, therefore, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me, and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2025 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Longmont, and commit to increasing public awareness of intimate partner abuse. Do we have someone that would like to accept this proclamation? And do you have a few words to say to us? Okay. Can you turn the mic on, please? Is it on? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Nissen. I work with the Longmont Ending Violence Initiative, or the Levi program, under Longmont Public Safety. I work closely with Brenda Bassett, victim advocate, who wrote this proclamation but unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. Victim Services and Levi are both really passionate about domestic violence awareness and believe that prevention should be a community-wide effort. Unfortunately, domestic violence remains a prevalent issue throughout Longmont, making up a majority of the cases we see. This makes it so important that survivors know they aren't alone and that there is support available. One way that you can show your support is to wear purple throughout the month of October. Anyone who wants to learn more about domestic violence, local resources, or tools to be a support person is welcome to join us at the library this Thursday for a domestic violence awareness workshop. There's a session from 1 to 2 p.m. and another one from 5:30 to 6. There's more information available at the Longmont Public Library's website as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want a picture receiving this?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, looking good. Counting down 3, 2. All right, one more time, 3, 2, 1. One more time, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, guys.
We're now on our study session items. Does anyone need a break up here? Or by the way?
When we start considering CPS domestic violence, then we'll be on track.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Our study session item is second public hearing on the 2026 budget and final council direction. See, we have Teresa Malloy and Sandra here today, Cifuentes. It's our final update.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Sandra Cifuentes, Budget Manager. We have a really short presentation for you all tonight. We'd like to point out some of the changes that have occurred to the proposed budget since we first presented it to you in August. And then we do need to hold the second public hearing tonight. And then lastly, we'll be asking for final direction for the 26 budget. So there really was only two major changes to the proposed budget that we wanted to point out. The first was with the one-time property tax. We did receive preliminary assessed value certifications from the county, and these did come in lower than expected. So we have reduced the one-time property tax funding in the general fund by $536,000. Originally, we had proposed $770,000. So with this reduction, the new one-time property tax amount is $233,000. Then the next change, these were really tied to positions. Your council packet did include information on the positions that were affected by the changes and the reasoning behind those. This did affect 6 different funds. Those are listed on the screen, but we did want to point those out. Any changes to the funding totals will be included in attachment N, or they were included in attachment N. So you'll have the original proposed as it was presented in August, changes in total by fund, and then the new proposed 26 budget. With these changes, the new 2026 budget amount is now $519.8 million. Of that, $93.2 million is allocated to capital improvement projects. So with that, I will let you hold the second public hearing, and then after that, we'll ask for final direction.
Thank you, Sandra. Can you go back one slide for me? For the public's interest that sitting here, can you explain one more? Go back one more. This one. Explain the reduction in one-time property tax. Who is this reduction for?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Teresa Malloy, Chief Financial Officer. So it is unearmarked funds. They are just a placeholder that we put in the budget, one-time funding. We do expect some additional changes between now and when we get our final certifications from the county in December. So this number may even come down more. These funds are not earmarked. They're just included in the budget. Should City Manager Dominguez need some additional funding, once we know the final property tax number, we'll know how much is available that he can use as needed.
Okay, thank you for that, because the way it reads here, if someone doesn't understand the budget, it looks like the city is going to reduce property taxes. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. So this is in case our property taxes come in under.
Let me kind of step you through it. So we
Okay.
get a preliminary estimate from the Boulder County Assessor's Office when we start the process, and a lot of times it's verbal. It is verbal. And so that's what we base our budget process
Okay.
on. We get the formal update at the end of August, correct?
Correct. A preliminary
Mary.
certification in the end of August.
So then, when we start the budget, we come in and we say, here's what we think we're going to get. We had $700,000 in the budget that we were treating as one time, similar to what we did last year when we treated $2.6 million as one time, because we were anticipating the changes in the ratios and everything else. The number went down in what we heard verbally to what they gave us in August by 536,000. So what's left is 233,000, and we have to budget it because if we don't budget it, then we can't use it. But there's a risk that it could go down again in December when we get the final information from the county.
Okay.
And what's interesting about the property tax piece, we're one of the smallest components in property tax. The largest component in terms of where property tax goes is to the school districts and to the county, I believe. And so our percentage of it is smaller than the other jurisdictions.
Okay. So actually what's going down is the amount of property taxes that people are paying.
Correct.
And, right, so okay. I just want to make that very clear to people who are sitting out here, that it is not the city that is going to reduce their property taxes. Councilor Popkin.
Yeah, I'm still not entirely clear on this. So I just wanted to wear the dunce cap here for a second. So is this is the one-time property tax amount, is that what the city is projecting for so we can plan for that? And that's the reduction? Or like, is that the adjustment is that the net difference that you're planning for? Or is that a physical reduction of what you're expecting to receive now based on updated number? What is that actually?
It is a physical reduction in the amount we are expected to receive. Correct.
Okay. So we are now planning for less
Yes.
because of that reduction.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, and that's a reduction that's coming from what the county gives to us, or not? Well,
It's
it's
the
from what's
assessors.
collected overall for
Yeah,
us.
our original estimates that we based the proposed budget on was based on information from the county, as Harold mentioned. However, it was high.
Okay, so it's the net between what was initially projected from that rate versus what we're actually receiving.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had one other question unrelated to that. When I see, in case this is helpful for the public hearing, in our council communication, when I see all the market changes for all the different positions, that's referring to the job market specific payments for those types of roles at those levels, correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Christ.
So on a tighter budget, we had talked about wayfinding signs, and we talked about 50,000 for adding signage on the extremities of the city. Is that going to be hanging in the balance if we don't have money, the extra money? Are we reducing the budget in any other categories is my question.
No, we are not. So what we had budgeted for wayfinding has not changed. The CAP had no changes in 2026. So it's really just what we included in the council comm.
Okay. I have one other question for you, Sandra. We have a 50% chance that we'll be having a special election after the November 4th election. Have we budgeted for an election for the city?
Yeah, I think, yes, we've increased that amount actually a couple of years ago, I believe, for that issue.
Okay.
What I would say on capital expenditures is that is one thing that we watch pretty close in terms of if we're seeing financial challenges, we'll go to capital expenditures first before we go on to the ongoing operating expenditures in the individual funds.
Okay, so we'll forestall a project that we're working on.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue from council, I will now open the public hearing on our 2026 budget. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this? Steve Altschuler.
Steve Altschuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. So for anybody out there that might be watching, although I know the TVs are out, if you're not good at math, this is a 13% increase over last year. I don't know anyone that's gotten a 13% raise. The cost of inflation is under 3%. And I don't know all the particulars. Obviously, I have not seen all the line items. But to go up 13% in 1 year, I think is deplorable. Let me put it that way. I would love if you guys could find some way of taking better care of the citizens of Longmont rather than just taking all the money that you can, because this is not anyone fighting to help the citizens of Longmont. It's just spending money wantonly.
Thank you. Megan.
Yes, as you know, I was talking about gang stalking. I very much agree with the increases in taxes. And as you know, since right now I've been gang stalked, I don't currently pay taxes. But I do think that in order to be able to get to a sustainable, to sustainability within a city, within a county, within an entity, if something that's larger than the self, that you need to be able to tax it. I don't believe that it should be based on gold, but I think that I'm not going to talk about that right now. The point is that this is a very good budget, and I appreciated a few weeks ago when the police officers were talking, and you guys said that it was about the people. It wasn't about coming over and trying to, just think about money and keep things as restricted as possible, because you have to have that leeway within the city. You have to have that leeway to be able to provide for the people. And so I think that all of these amenities that here in Longmont that you're advocating for and that you're making possible is something that I believe in. So I wanted to say thank you, and that your budget looks amazing.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to address this budget item? Seeing no one, I'll close public. I will close the public. I lost my word. Hearing, and call for a vote to adopt the 2026 budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring to adopt this budget 2026. Is that?
Yeah. And what we will be doing is bringing back the ordinances that will
Yes.
adopt the budget and the resolutions for the pay plan and the financial policies.
Okay, I know we are adopting the budget. I wasn't sure if this was going to be the final item that we needed to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
basically, we just want to make sure you are good with everything that has been presented
Yes.
thus far, and no additional changes are needed.
Thank you. Councilor McCoy, what are you saying? Yes, it was moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. Okay. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, Teresa and Sandra. We are now on the conservation overlay fee waivers analysis, and I would like to invite Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson to the podium. One moment, please.
All right, we're all situated here. Jennifer Hewitt Apperson, Principal Planner of Planning and Development. So we are here to follow up on earlier discussions that we've had with this council over the last year or so regarding potential application fee waivers for neighborhoods seeking a conservation overlay district. Staff was directed to bring back an analysis to council of potential fiscal impacts of allowing the planning director to have the ability to waive application fees for registered neighborhood groups. So I'm just going to start with a quick refresher on the Conservation Overlay District. So these are intended to conserve residential neighborhoods and areas in the city that retain character of periods of development, also to stabilize and improve property values in such areas, and promote new construction that is compatible with the character of such areas. These requirements will overlay or supplement the applicable standards found in the underlying zoning district while not affecting permitted uses. These districts are intended to be responsive to neighborhood context with special development standards. They are different from locally designated historic districts. These are a zoning solution that address lot and building standards versus a historic district's primary design approach. Such districts may also include more detailed architectural standards and the general standards required within the land development code. So I'll note that this district does predate the 2018 zoning code update. It actually goes back at least 20 years as far as I can tell. So there were some amendments to this section as part of the 2018 update regarding minimum criteria for establishing the CO district. And it's, again, I'll note also that these are intended to be community initiated and not city initiated. So basically, we aren't going to force them on anyone. It's up to the community to come to us. So in addition to compliance with the review criteria for rezonings stated in section 1502.050H, the city council may zone an area as a CO district only if there are certain minimum criteria and findings that are met. So this is just the findings that are required in addition to the usual standards that we have. So in terms of eligibility, the applicant must provide either a letter from a registered neighborhood group requesting a CO district for all properties within the proposed district, or for areas without such a group, written evidence that more than 50% of the property owners show support and have written support supporting such a district. If there's a registered neighborhood group, there is no requirement that the evidence presented showing a majority of property owners in support of the overlay. That requirement is not part of the requirements now. So this evening, we will be focusing on registered neighborhood groups. So we treat an application for conservation, we would treat an application for a conservation overlay the same as we would treat any application for rezoning in terms of process as well as in terms of fees. So rezoning fees are $750 base fee plus $10 an acre for the area being considered. I'll note, so the fee manual, specifically page 4 of the 2025 adopted fee manual, does permit the planning director to reduce or waive application fees for public or nonprofit agencies. We're here because registered neighborhood groups are not typically officially 501c3 nonprofit agencies and therefore would not be eligible for such fee waivers if they're seeking a conservation overlay for their service area. So you may recall that the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association has requested a fee waiver so that they may apply for a conservation overlay. At previous meetings, the city attorney's office determined that the appropriate method for doing this would be an amendment to the fee manual that would enable the planning director to waive fees for any registered neighborhood group rather than council granting waivers on a case-by-case basis. Staff was directed to bring back an analysis of how such a unilateral approach could impact development review fee revenue. So we based this analysis on a historic survey plan, that the Historic Preservation Survey Strategic Plan that was finalized earlier this year. That was really what guided our how we identified the eligible, potentially eligible neighborhoods. Pardon me. So in particular, this plan did identify 12 neighborhoods that could potentially be eligible for a conservation overlay district, and 4 that would probably be most appropriate for such a designation. Those 4 neighborhoods would be the historic East Side, the historic West Side, the Kensington/Cannery East, and the Old North neighborhoods. So again, as noted, this is intended to be a community-initiated process. The fact that a neighborhood could be eligible for such a district doesn't mean that it would necessarily be pursued. Again, as I noted previously, this overlay zone has been in our code for probably over 20 years, and we've never had a request to enact one, so it hasn't been used yet. So that gives some indication of the likelihood that we would have to waive fees for a number of groups. So made some assumptions. We assumed the average neighborhood size seeking such a designation would be 150 acres, mostly because this is what the historic East Side is. So we just assumed that was probably representative. So based on the application fee of $750 plus $10 an acre, we would be looking at a potential application fee of $22.50 for an eligible neighborhood. So if we were looking at the most likely neighborhoods that were identified, that would be roughly $9,000 in fees that would be potentially lost if they were able to be waived. If for some reason we had a rush on organizations wanting to do conservation overlays, that could potentially be up to $27,000. I don't know that really either scenario is likely anytime soon, but this is really just presenting a broader hypothetical situation. So Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association has indicated that the fee question is part of why they haven't moved forward with their application for a conservation overlay. As it concerns the waiver, 1502.03.0A3 gives council authority to approve the schedule of fees under Title 15. As noted, the city attorney's office previously stated that we should, if we pursued this type of waiver for registered neighborhood groups, the appropriate approach would be to allow the planning director to waive them for all groups rather than just one. So the question tonight is really should we be looking at, should we pursue amendment of the fee manual to allow the planning director to waive fees for registered neighborhood groups seeking a conservation overlay zone? And with that, I will take any questions or if you have any further discussion.
Jennifer, how much staff time does it take to do this? Since you haven't done it much, I don't know that there's a...
I will say based on just the pre-application work that we've done to date on the Historic East Side request, the application fee doesn't even begin to cover it. So it was, I would say I've probably spent just on the pre-application process upwards of 40 hours on this over the last few years.
Okay. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So I just want to kind of talk to precedent, if you will. Generally speaking, when we have decided to delegate what were previously city council responsibilities to our administrative staff, they have been in the pursuit of community building concepts like affordable housing, to try to lean the process, make it a cheaper process to be able to realize affordable housing projects by cutting some of the administrative costs and, hastening the review process of those things by cutting council out of the process, if you will. And to me, while could be somewhat questionable, we've also added things to the council process that weren't historically there, such as consideration of protections surrounding our open spaces and greenways and things along those lines. And I think those are all very noble, and generally we've had some issues with how those have been organized, but those have been for a much more common public good in a way, where this seems very tailored, and I don't think that necessarily delegating this meets that precedent level for me. I don't, as was stated, this has really not come up in 20 years except for this first time. So it's not like it's taken up a lot of council's time in the past 20 years. So I would prefer that the city council remain the deciding body in this circumstance. I know we're not talking about a significant amount of money comparatively to our overall budget per se. But I do feel that we should be very careful when we choose to delegate things to administrative review and decision without city council input. And so I don't think this is necessarily the appropriate way to move forward with conservation overlays, because there can be some unintended consequences with conservation overlays when we start talking about the very real need that's probably going to come forward for the city in some redevelopment. We're meeting closer and closer our kind of built area boundaries, right? Where we can, based on our boundaries, continue to build. And so there will be need for redevelopment in the possible near future. And some of these neighborhoods could be ripe for affordable housing projects that are, high value to the community. And so I don't want to hamstring a future council by not allowing them the opportunity to weigh in on those as they come forward, because balancing existing neighborhoods with redevelopment is extremely important, I think, for the health of the city of Longmont in consideration of community, because a lot of times these historic neighborhoods are not as well organized as Henna is, and may not have the kind of lobbying ability, if you will, to come before council and express concerns that Henna does have. And so those are just my concerns with this proposal, and happy to hear everybody else.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I was just trying to understand where you're coming from, Councilmember Rodriguez, in regards to you're not against changing the nonprofit part of it, but you want to keep it so that it's council direct. Okay, I agree with you on that. Thank you.
There you go. Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez and McCoy, for those comments as well. A couple quick questions, Jennifer, for you. You mentioned before that the assumption in the calculations here was that the Henna neighborhood would be representative of other neighborhoods in terms of size. Do we have a sense of actually how accurate that is? Because usually when you're I only ask because I balk I balk at anyone who makes a comment of 1 equals average.
It was, that's the one that we have done the acreage analysis for, and it's realistically probably larger than most of the neighborhoods that would potentially be eligible. So it was definitely some back of the napkin, but that was the one we have the acreage for. So in my opinion, it does represent that's about as big as you're going to get probably.
Okay, so in other words, you're assuming that for other purposes, rather than that's going to inherently be the average that we'll see.
Right.
Because it sounds like it's above average in size.
It probably is above average in size. I haven't, like I said, we haven't done the acreage analysis for all of the other neighborhoods. So, and we also, it's also unknown how many of the potentially eligible neighborhoods have registered neighborhood groups who would even be interested in pursuing this. So.
Yeah, appreciate that. One other question, and it kind of builds off of some of the comments that Councilmember Rodriguez was making. you know, I wasn't here when this first came up, but I'm wondering, are there other types of applications, residential or commercial, that have requested fee waivers like this, and how are those concerned? Like, I'm thinking about the precedent from that standpoint, and kind of what we would think about in those situations.
I will let, looks like City Manager Rodriguez will be piping in.
Congratulations.
I do not have that information. So.
You know, so I can tell you that we've had nonprofits come in and request fee waivers. Specifically, I can think of the greenhouses on Hover, which was assisted living, and there were some requirements put in, I think, to take Medicare for that. Our Center, I think, was another project that came in, but in terms of neighborhoods requesting fee waivers specifically at this program, I haven't heard that. What I can tell you that I've heard is a lot of folks ask for fee waivers, and many times their answer is, no, we can't do fee waivers because of these code provisions. So we get a lot of requests for fee waivers in different scenarios. In terms of this program, I can only think of 2 off the top of my head where we've actually done it.
Right, I could think of a lot of folks who might want a fee waiver on something.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And so I'm trying to understand kind of what, like, is this a, maybe this is a question for staff, maybe it's a question for other council members, but is this a precedent that we're setting specifically for a conservation overlay situation? Is this a precedent we would be setting for fee waivers in general? Like, I'm not opposed to the concept, but I'm just trying to understand what the implications beyond just these 12 neighborhoods that I understand that was your focus for the analysis, but I'm trying to think beyond that too.
So I think it could be tailored in such a way that would be specific to registered neighborhood groups seeking a conservation overlay, unless City Attorney May has another opinion.
I'm trying to understand your question, and so I want to reiterate it to say, by giving fee waivers, do we create the opportunity for people to request other fee waivers that may not have a direct connection to this? Is that a...
Yeah, I think that's a question that I have for you, and then the question I have for my fellow council members, building off of Councilmember Rodriguez, is like, is this the topic the priority that we want to start setting those kinds of fee waivers for? Because once you open that process, I could assume that I would expect that other groups and other residential or commercial folks would have a request for fee waivers from our fee manual, because there are a lot of fees.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the answer I gave you before of, yes, we get a lot of requests for fee waivers and what the fee impact is, and the majority of times we're saying we can't do this fee waiver unless you do this. So I think that's a little bit to what Councilman Rodriguez was saying, is when we look at our affordable housing fee waivers, they are designed to produce affordable housing. When we look at economic development fee waivers, they are designed to create other value within the community. And whether that's generation of sales tax, or it's generation of property tax, or business personal property tax. When we look at the fee waivers in the redevelopment areas that we focused on, and we think about urban renewal, it's designed to remove blight.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our fee waivers have a direct connection into something that we want to achieve as a community that's very specific to an outcome. So, and the example I can give you, one that we do see a lot, is when we do have projects that come forward, the tree mitigation fee is one that I've often heard a lot of. Well, can we get a fee waiver for our tree mitigation fee? Even in projects in a redevelopment sense, the council historically has said, no, we don't want to waive that tree mitigation fee. So operationally, yes, we get requests all the time for fee waivers. Thus far, the way it's been determined and the way we've looked at it is there's a very particular outcome that the council's wanted to achieve when we apply fee waivers. So there's a nexus to something that we're trying to accomplish as a community.
Right, thank you. And so I guess in this case is the request for the fee waiver here for the conservation overlay application would be to help preserve the character of existing neighborhoods that are in a particularly historic neighborhoods or something like that.
Potentially.
That would be
But it would enable the registered neighborhood groups to move forward because most of these groups are not very flush with cash. So
sure.
that is the origin of the request.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. And good discussion, everyone. Jennifer, looking back, hindsight is always, more accurate than looking forward. Would it have been easier if you had had the fee waived to get all this done? I know this has kind of gone on for a while, and maybe that's taken more of your time because it's the first one.
I don't know that it would necessarily be the case. The fee question did not come up at the very, very beginning of this. A lot of the time spent on this was in meetings with the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association, doing a neighborhood meeting. That took quite a bit of time, was getting that organized and set up and such. It was, getting the neighborhood meeting scheduled. It was doing the pre-application meeting, notes and research and, going back into our old code. So a lot of it was upfront research that was part of the pre-application process. And because this has not been done before, and because this conservation overlay provision is pretty unique and has some nuance to it, that upfront research and really discussing with community, with the HANA representatives, that was really, probably the biggest time, occupier. So it was really setting the groundwork. We don't collect application fees until we have an application. So the pre-application process, that was basically legwork to set the stage.
Okay. So this might get easier as you go along because you're now practiced at it. And then would you have full discretion? I mean, could you waive half of the fee, or is it all or nothing?
That's a decision for the council to make.
Okay. And then also, could we put a limit on how many you would waive in 1 year?
Again, that is a question for council and for the city attorney's office.
So I'm looking over at City Attorney May. If he's got. Oh.
I mean, the process stays the same regardless of whether or not the fee is waived. And because it is a neighborhood by neighborhood overlay, it's really not it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Approach.
But you might want to have some discretion based on how much time you have available to work on an application.
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. So your basic principle for fees is equal treatment, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you set a policy that follows the rule of equal treatment, then we would support that from the city attorney's office. All these different variations start to introduce discretion. Discretion's bad in fees. Fees are meant to be a fee for service to help offset the staff costs to provide whatever service that is. Mm-hmm. So those are the basic guideposts that my office looks at when advising on this matter. I mean, it would come back in terms of the fee manual, and we could take direction and give options to implement what council directs. It really, I think we're looking for council direction on which way to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That's actually very helpful, as usual. So, and you're saying there are only maybe 12 neighborhoods that would apply for this?
I can't even say that all 12 of them would apply.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's 12 that potentially could be eligible, whether or not it's up to the neighborhood as far as whether or not they want to pursue it. It is a process that would take quite a bit of organizational capacity. because they are
If you tried to
essentially-
do it all in 1 year, yes.
Well, just for doing a conservation overlay period,
Okay.
it would take a lot of organizational capacity on the part of the registered neighborhood group.
Oh, I see.
Because they're the ones who are leading, they are effectively an applicant. So the city is treating this like a rezoning application.
Okay. And it seems like the prices stated are somewhat arbitrary since you had never done one before, and it doesn't actually relate to the amount of work that you're putting in. And
It was based on our rezoning fee,
Right.
our rezoning application fee. So
Okay.
that's 100% what it was based on, and we treat it just like any other rezoning at this point.
okay. Well, I do think there is value to a conservation overlay in that, because it doesn't deny building in that area, does it? It just asks that it be compatible.
It doesn't necessarily, but it's one of those things we would have to look closely at, especially as we are dealing with the statutory standards for ADUs at the state level. The way the ordinance is set up, it could present some challenges for new development, or infill, or adding ADUs on certain blocks, because it gets down to a granular block by block average level for some standards. So it's something that we would need to look closely at, but my professional opinion is that it's been on the books for more than 20 years and it's never been used. So there's probably a reason for that.
I think to your question, but for the change in state law, yes, it could impact what can be built on properties. Specifically within the ADU conversation is, prior to the change in the state law, it would have reduced who can build what, where, based on ADUs. The state law really, by being put into place, actually in that case eliminates that piece of the equation. And so when she's saying percentages of property and what can be built, that was one of the questions that came up within the neighborhood, and it was from a resident who said, if we do this, then I can't build an ADU on my property. And the answer was yes. The state law changed that. In that now basically all properties can have ADUs. So
But
details matter.
Yeah. And it could impact the ability of certain properties on certain blocks, because it is the way the code is written. It looks at block averages. If someone wants to do an addition, it could potentially, it could impact that. Less of an impact on ADUs. But there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done. It's a block by block analysis.
Some of the original ADUs in town are in these historic areas.
Yep.
So they would be included in the average.
Mhm.
Yeah. And would be considered compatible. But it might be property specific, is what you're saying.
The numbers. And it's dependent on what people want to put in the conservation overlay district and what that looks like. So there's a big question, because it really depends on what they put in it and what they bring forward.
So the neighborhood would have some control over that.
Yes.
Yeah. To allow it or to
Yes.
tailor it to the.
Exactly. It's a neighborhood. It's a community initiated effort, and it's the community that brings forth what they want to include in the overlay, as far as the development and design standards.
Well, I see that there's other comments after mine, so thank you so much for going down into the weeds with me.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question around, just our conservation overlay policy in general. Should we be looking at that to make sure that the language in there does align with state statute, or are there things in there that we should be looking to revise before we even start addressing the waiving development fees?
That's a very good question. The language is fairly agnostic as far as ADUs and the state standards, as far as how it would impact. There isn't much of an impact on there. Where you get into it is when you get into block averages. So there might be some places where we would need to make amendments to there might be some places where we would need to do some amendments to reflect the new state standards. I'm looking at City Attorney May.
I see you looking. Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney again. There is an ongoing lawsuit against several of the state statutes challenging the home rule authority to do local zoning. And so I think those lawsuits would have, the outcome of that lawsuit could have an impact on how we view the conservation overlay vis-a-vis state statutes. And that's was filed this year, so it's going to be a little while before that case is decided. So that's to say, I don't know.
Okay.
But it is a consideration. What we think is the law today may not be the law in 2 years.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate the work that staff put into this. I obviously wasn't part of the original direction here. I think it's fascinating to see the amount of kind of lost revenue that's estimated in this, which I wouldn't define as particularly significant. And so, like, I'm taking note of the fact that, like, maybe in the future for fee waiver discussions, we're spending a lot of time on something that's going to have a very low financial impact to the city. And so just noting that all of the staff time that went into this and even just this conversation here tonight is, you know, time is money. So it's an interesting principle conversation that we've been having about like when this applies, and I appreciate that. But I think it behooves us to think about the efficiency of this going forward. Thank you.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Well, you're looking for direction tonight. And so if there's not any other comments, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I would move that we direct, use staff recommendation 1 with the caveat that Councilmember Rodriguez is bringing up, that this about having it come to council instead of a staff.
For the public, can you read caveat number 1?
So that is
number 1.
direct staff to amend the fee manual to waive development fees for registered neighborhood groups seeking a conservation overlay zoning district. But I want to make sure that we are still it's still coming to council since they're more of a case-by-case situation.
Does he have a second? Councilor Rodriguez? Okay. So Councilor McCoy recommended that we amend the fee to waive fees for registered neighborhood groups seeking overlay districts but still come to council, seconded by Councilor Christ. Councilor Rodriguez. Oops,
Go ahead.
it's not showing up.
Oh, yeah, it's gone.
It's gone. Can you turn it off and turn it on again?
Yeah, there you go.
Still doesn't come on.
Still not?
Still not showing.
No, it's on now.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. My question is that actually even a change?
Not really.
We think it is because there's not a mechanism in the ordinance to allow for a fee waiver. This is really a two-parter. So the motion is to create a mechanism to allow for the fee waiver, which gives the council the ability to do it. And then you
Okay.
said that council does it. We've gotten into this before. So when I mentioned the tree mitigation fee, in Village of the Peaks, they requested a tree mitigation fee, and the council voted to reduce the tree mitigation fee, but the ordinance didn't allow for council to do this. So this gives you the allowance to do it, and then you said you're the one that does it versus an administrative process.
So if there were no change, they would not have the ability whatsoever to make the application?
They can make it, but there's no fee waiver.
Well, no fee
therefore-
waiver. So they couldn't request a fee waiver.
Correct.
If there was no change. But this would allow them to request the fee waiver.
Correct.
But it would have to come to council.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarifying question.
Did you have Okay, hang on.
It's like going gray on her thing.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I guess I'm not opposed to the motion. I'm trying to understand if there are unintended consequences of this. And particularly, does this basically open the door to anyone coming to council to start requesting fee waivers? Like, is it just specific? Like, where's the dividing line on this? Is this very narrowly tailored? It's just for rezoning applications?
It would be
No.
tailored specifically for registered neighborhood groups who are registered with the Neighborhood Group Leadership Association. It would be tailored for those groups who are specifically seeking a conservation overlay zone.
Which, just to clarify, or neighborhoods with over 50% sign on is what it was.
That's the yeah. That is the other. That is the eligibility requirement. Yeah.
So this motion would not, but it certainly would open the door to say, hey, this council is receptive to groups that have a specific purpose, wanting to request fee waivers. Right? Is that a concern? Maybe I'm just overblowing this, and I'm just curious. But I'm just.
I think that would be a different conversation for a different type of a waiver that they would probably have to, yeah. This is specifically for the conservation
Overlay.
Specifically. They're going to come to us all the time for different waivers.
Right, but the more that we grant that in specific situations, ideally we should have a very specific public justification, which I do think has been stated for this situation, but I want to make sure that there's consistency there. Anyway, thank you for that discussion.
So I haven't made a comment yet. What I'm thinking is that, pulling in everybody's comments is that, and especially what our city manager said, whenever we give fee waivers or tax relief, there always seems to be a quid pro quo. What is the city getting for this, for the common good? For example, if it is tax, there's clawbacks. If they don't perform to a certain degree. We're not holding this to any standard like that. And that makes me a bit nervous, especially when they have the ability to change the zoning, to put whatever they want in their neighborhoods. And that seems to take away from our planning, comp plans a little bit. And I don't think, though, that most residents are going to think about that. But I just want to bring that up, that it would lean into that. So I'm going to vote for this because I do think that it needs to come to council. Make sure that it is complying with comp plans, with traffic, streets, with everything that we have to do in neighborhoods. So let's vote. I see our city manager and city attorney. Okay, you're good? Okay. You always make me nervous when you put your heads together like that.
Like, oh God, what do we do?
Yes.
Conferring. Yes. Okay.
Oh, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. The next thing on our list is C, the City of Longmont Public Improvements, Design Standards and Construction Specification Updates, Sections 100 through 700. Josh Sherman is our staff member to help us through this.
We ready? Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Josh Sherman, Engineering Administrator with Utilities and Public Works. I have a short presentation this evening to provide a status update on the public improvement design standards and construction specifications, which are also known as the city standards. So what are the city standards? They're a set of policy, criteria, rules, and guidelines to ensure the quality and consistency of the design and installation of city infrastructure. The city standards are a policy document, and as such, any updates are brought to council for review and approval. They are incorporated into the Land Development Code via reference, specifically Title 15 of the Longmont Municipal Code 1507050. There are elements of the design standards that are technical in nature. Examples of those are what's included in the appendices, such as construction details, notes, approved materials list, things like that. These types of elements tend to change more frequently. An example might be a pipe manufacturer consolidates or changes their name, or a manufacturer stops making a part and we need to approve the materials list to identify a new number. So in light of that, staff is requesting that council allow for these technical items to be approved administratively by the city engineer as needed. And that request is reflected in the draft design standards, specifically in section 100.07. So there are 8 sections of the city standards. I've got them up here. I promise I won't read them all. Each section includes details, and then there's appendices that support all of the sections. Section 100 are the general requirements. The general requirements really set the purpose and authority of the city to implement the city standards, and in that way they sort of umbrella or govern over the other design standards. On the bookend is the recently approved Section 800 urban design standards. Those were approved late last year and went into effect early this year. In between are sections 200 through 700. Those sections specifically each one covers a specific utility. So for example, section 200 is transportation, 400 is wastewater, 500 is water distribution, 700 Longmont Power and Communications. So why are we here talking about design standards updates? Regular updates are required to the design standards to reflect changes in the industry standards or improvements in construction management and best practices. The current standards were approved in 2007. As I mentioned before, Section 800 was recently approved. The focus of the overall update is on sections 100 through 700, including the relevant details and appendices. We're not currently proposing any current updates to Section 800 at all. I do want to acknowledge that there was a significant effort back in 2019 to update the city design standards. Final drafts were, they represented a robust effort by staff to really update the standards and restructure them to bring them current. This included review and input by design consultants, the development community, the public, advisory boards, and others. This current effort is not intended to restart that effort or redo that effort. We want to pick up where those were left off in 2019, review them to make sure they're still in accordance with the municipal code, update them to reflect any changes between 2019 and now within the industry and the construction world. So the schedule that we have is we'd like to bring sections 100 and 700 first. So section 100 is the general requirements that I mentioned before. They really provide that umbrella and guidance for all the other sections, which is why it needs to go first. Section 700 is Longmont Power and Communications. The final drafts for those are ready, and so we'd like to bring those together. Final drafts have been posted to the city webpage. They've been out there for the public. We had a public engagement meeting last Thursday on the 2nd. We're here tonight to receive any feedback or questions that council may have, with the intention of being ready to bring section 100 and 700 forward for a first reading in October, the 28th, and then back for second reading in November. The other standard sections, 200 through 600, we intend to bring back as early as we can next year. We would group those together as they are ready. So 400 and 500 are wastewater and water, along with section 600 for parks and irrigation. bring those together first is our intent. Then we would follow with Section 300, which we want to bring in cooperation with an effort that's being done to update the Longmont Storm Drainage Criteria Manual. Those design standards really go hand in hand with that criteria manual. And then finally, Section 200, which is the transportation section, and bring that back lastly, but no later than early Q2 and 26. All of the sections we intend to bring through another public engagement period. Again, we'll have drafts posted to the city website, do some outreach and seek public engagement. Relevant sections that, such as Section 500, the water distribution, would go to advisory board, so the water board. Section 200, transportation, to the transportation advisory board, before we complete those final drafts and bring those forward to council for consideration. This is my free plug for the city webpage and the design standards update. Again, I mentioned the final drafts for 100 and 700 are posted there. They were also in the council comm this evening, as well as the relevant details and appendices. We've asked all the public to provide any formal comments they have to the email address that you see there. With that, that's my short presentation. Thank you for your time, and myself and other members of staff are here to certainly have a discussion or answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you, Josh. Just a couple questions. First, when we're thinking about citywide design standards, does that apply public property only, private and public? Like, I'm thinking like an HOA, do they follow it for building and design? Do they follow all of these design standards too?
Yes, good question. So these design standards really govern development in the way that they set the minimum criteria. For the public improvements that would be necessary to serve those developments. They do extend in certain cases to what we would call private improvements, so it might be your water service lateral, sewer service lateral, et cetera, where these standards do set minimum criteria for those materials or sizes, et cetera.
Thank you. My second question, I'm looking at some of the exceptions on like variances to street design standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking back to some of the conversations we had with kind of utilities and street design around True North and some of the things from various development there. Now we're thinking about like, what does this urban renewal innovation zone potentially allow for? How prescriptive are these design standards versus would those other zones just have to be the exception to the exception? Kind of like, how does that layer into this?
You
can
go
take it
for it, and
first,
then
and then
we'll jump in.
So
yeah.
I would describe Section 800, the urban design standards, as creating those exceptions that we commonly saw for redevelopment and denser areas. So that's what was brought forward with the urban design standards, are a way to facilitate those public improvements in a safe and functional way, but account for those types of items.
So part of the conversation, to Josh's point, when we started looking at this, council was really focused on when we look at housing stock, creating density, when we look at urban renewal areas, is more of that what we call urban landscape that we're seeing in some of the work. And what we found is that the design standards that we had in place were more suburban in nature, which made some of those projects more difficult, or we had to go through the PUD process in order to get that done. But council also, at the time, didn't want to have those design standards that were really focused on that urban development concept in terms of achieving the densities you need, or really that urban corridor concept, to then be put in place for more suburban style developments. And so that's really the distinction in Section 800, is it really applies to that urban development process. And if you're going to do a typical suburban development, the rest of the standards are really what we have to look at a high level. That's what we were thinking through.
Thank you. And then my last question is, I've heard a lot of questions, concerns, frustrations from residents about how some of the projects look, Right. And some people will be like, look, I'm okay with more building here or more housing here, but like, can it look nice? Like, does that get addressed in these design standards, or is that somewhere else in the?
That's mostly somewhere else, which is Title 15 of the Land Development Code.
Okay, so that's under that piece, and then is that part of this review discussion right now? No, that's separate.
That's separate. These are really focused on those horizontal improvements.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So Title 15 is where I need to go for gargoyles?
Yes. Yeah, this is really outside of streets. You don't see anything else really in these design standards because it's typically underground.
Okay. Councillor Christ.
So, Mr. Sherman, I sent you an email. Oh, you have my questions there.
I received them,
You
yes.
probably remember them better than I do. So my first one was in regards to Envision Longmont, because we'll be reworking that. And is this kind of the beginning platform to start tailoring that, or is it just?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, these.
You don't see any conflicts between?
I don't see any conflicts with the current Envision Longmont, and I wouldn't anticipate any focus changes on the current drafts that we have for the design standards based on what might come out of that guiding document or changes to that guiding document.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I don't know if I can do these in order, so you correct me if I get it wrong.
No.
One of the things in the packet was that you want to have some administrative latitude to change things when technology changes or standards change. And I'm wondering how we could make that public and how that would be how it would inform the public and the people that would use it.
Right.
Yeah.
In that specific section 100.07, there's criteria that talks about the design standards being updated annually. One of the reasons actually that the city attorney's office recommended that we include that is because it puts the end user on notice that at a minimum they should look and look back and ensure that they're using the most current ones at a minimum annually.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would also guide staff in terms of if we do have some of these minor changes, we might bundle those and hold those until we're ready to update them together.
Okay, so you've already decided how that could be most efficiently done. Now, if you have a plan in place that's good for a year, suppose you get it in at the end of the year, it could all be different by the time you're trying to finish it, yes?
I would hesitate to say all be different, right? When we talk
So it
about
could there might be a few tweaks.
there might be a few tweaks
Okay.
for a specific, again, if they don't make this widget anymore and we need to have another approved material to replace that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, what's my next question?
I can bring this around and share it.
Well, I think I was talking about some of the feedback we've gotten also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And generally, do these new design standards add cost to building? Or is it pretty much the same, you think?
I think it's the same. Again, we're really trying to update these standards to be current with current industry standards,
Mhm.
whether that's asphalt mix design or concrete mix design or et cetera. There's certain examples like that.
So there might be more cost because this was last updated in 2007, did you say?
It was last updated in 2007.
Yeah.
The best example I can share with you is that our current section 200 currently states that it does not allow recycled asphalt pavement in an asphalt mix design.
Mm.
The industry has moved away from that 10 or 15 years ago, right? Colorado Department of Transportation, other local agencies and jurisdictions have recycled asphalt pavement is what is the norm in an asphalt mix design. To get what our standard is probably costs more. And we accept, as a design exception, the recycled asphalt pavement as the industry standard.
Okay, yeah. So it's actually a step forward in section 200.
A lot of these, yes.
Yeah. Now, so I have gotten some feedback about section 700 in that there are a lot more items that will add on to cost. But that wasn't completely negative. There was also some belief that it improves safety. So just if you could speak to the costs.
Mayor Peck, members of the City Council, Councilmember Chris. I'm Daryl Hahn from LPC. In terms of the costs, if you have specific questions, we can certainly chase those down. I'd hate to just speak broadly and generally and say all costs will be less than what they are today. I think there, the one specific example that we were looking at that might seem more costly is color coding our, some of our cables, right? So rather than everything coming in gray, NEC and ANSI standards now require, color coded cables. So you might think that that might be more expensive, but if that's the standard, it might actually, as Josh was saying earlier, it might be more expensive to try to get something that's all one color rather than the standard color coding. So that's just one example that kind of came up. But if you have specific questions, or if the feedback, if they had specific questions, we can certainly address those.
Well, it encouraged me to read more of Section 700 and try to figure out, what was of concern. So I will I'll give feedback to my feedbacker and see what specifically they were thinking.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now, we occasionally get comments from the public about the process becoming slow in terms of getting a project all the way through. And I did notice that it sometimes goes to the city engineer, and the city engineer has just so many days to make decisions on some of these things. Is that something we can make more efficient, or is that even the concern when we talk about things slowing down? Maybe there's other concerns.
Two thoughts. One, in these current Section 100, we've tried to reorganize and provide some clarity on the process. What's in the appendices are more checklists for different items that are required for a complete application that we may informally have today, but aren't in the appendices today.
Yeah, that was very helpful, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I like the list.
So hopefully that's helpful for applicants as well, to try to help guide them through the process so that it can be more efficient. The design exception piece of it, for the most part, I don't know that we're changing it a lot. It's sort of how it's written today in terms of the city engineer having the ability to grant the design exception for certain items.
Okay. So the process will probably take the same amount of time, or?
I'm going to jump in on that because I think you have multiple
Layers
process
there.
and layers that you're having to deal with. And so I think the checklist and things like that actually in some ways can make it easier. But beyond that, we're engaged in a lot of work right now that we just triggered in terms of working through all of our processes and really looking at it with multiple lenses. So one's going to be, for lack of a better word, a cultural lens in terms of how are we having conversations? How are we engaging with folks? How are we communicating? Are we communicating to the best of our ability? That's going to be a piece of it because communication shows itself a lot, especially when I get drug into certain questions. Another piece is going to be process in terms of, is the process as efficient and effective as we need to? Are the tools there for people in terms of what they need to make it easier for them? So David and Jen are actually leading that work, and we're starting in 2 weeks, I think, with the first conversation as we're moving through it, because it's more than just the design standards. It's customer service. It's communication. It's not necessarily what we say, it's how we say it. Josh has heard this from me. When I have to deliver bad news to someone, the first thing I do is pick up the phone and go, okay, you're going to get this, and you're going to get this email. It's not going to be great, but I want you to understand the context and think about it, because while it may be a little bit more time on the front end, it saves me time. It saves us time on the back end because we're framing it up. So those are all things we're going to start working on, because it's not just one piece, and really give our staff the tools to be more successful.
Great. I did see some notation of collaboration there with design teams and, engineers and other involved participants. So that was helpful to see also. Now, did I get all my questions? I think that might have been all of them.
I believe so.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Thank you.
We have no direction on this presentation, so thank you very much. You did give us the dates on things that are going to be it was just informative. So thank you for the dates on when you're going to be bringing
you.
these back. And thank you for the presentation. We are now at the last item, which is the draft saturated pattern policy and other airport-related items. I didn't really know what that meant, other airport-related items. So Sandy Cedar, I am hoping, and Mr. Brown, you can explain that to us. So after the other airport-related items, we're also going to get information on the VNAP, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Peck, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I am helping with airport stuff and trying to work through some of the council direction as our new staff has time to settle in and transition in. So the other items, I have had a wonderful opportunity over the last 6 months to take the last 20 years of public invite to be heard that I have heard and apply it to what's true and what's not true. So I thought I would just share some insights with you. That is the other stuff at the end.
I
So,
love that. Thank you.
so we're gonna go ahead and get started here. So today, our discussion points preview are 3 things. One is the saturated pattern policy, and Levi's going to go through that and the recommendations from the Airport Advisory Board. Then I thought, let's take that opportunity to also talk about the volunteer noise abatement procedures. I've learned a lot about this over the last couple of months, and I wanted to share a little video with you that Levi found, just to give people a real understanding, like what are we talking about when we talk about the VNAP, and then some other interesting facts. So, okay. So first of all, I just want to remind everybody the regulatory framework. So I'm not an attorney. I don't even like to play one on TV, but I wanted to just go through for just a minute and remind everybody that a lot of this is really completely out of the city's control, and it is regulated by the FAA. So federal law regulates that many airport operations, including the flight paths, the aircraft noise, flight safety, preempts local authority in these areas. By accepting the federal grant funding, we agree to that. We also say that the airport will be available for public use on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination for all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities. And that's important, that unjust discrimination comes in a lot of different times through the FAA information. The city can, however, implement some voluntary noise abatement procedures and policies, and can also implement voluntary flight patterns for safety at the airport. I want to be clear that the saturated pattern policy is a safety measure, and the volunteer noise abatement policy is a noise abatement measure. And one thing I just wanted for folks to know is that we actually had special counsel come in and explain a lot of this during the meeting. I think it's the November 24th meeting of 2024. I've included the link here so that people can go back and review what our special counsel said about that, who is an attorney and who should be the one commenting about it. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Levi to explain what are we even talking about? What is the saturated pattern policy?
All right, Levi Brown, Airport Manager. Saturated pattern policy. Saturated pattern policy was recently recommended by the Airport Advisory Board, so I'm just going to kind of give a quick breakdown on what that is. This policy would discourage touch-and-go landings when 5 or more aircraft are in the pattern at the same time. So there is some precedence for this. There was an AOPA guiding document, the Airport Operators and Pilots Association, which says that it is commonly used by smaller non-tethered airports. There's a few airports around the country that have used such saturated policies that we have reached out to and communicated with. The policy would aim to address airspace safety issues. And it was put fairly well away by our chair of our airport board, who said it's kind of like an all-you-can-ride wristband at the fair, where it's not stopping you from using the airport, but it says if there's so many people ahead of you, you got to get back in line again. So where, if there's 5 people doing touch and goes, if the 6th person comes in, at that point, that person would have to do a full stop landing, go back to the airfield, taxi back to the runway and take off again. So it essentially would reduce, in theory, the traffic that's, deconflicting the traffic that's in the pattern at any given time. Okay.
Yeah, just a point of clarification for my own benefit on this. You said something that was different from what was on the slide, which is
Okay.
you said when 5 or more aircraft are doing touch and goes, the slide says when 5 or more aircraft are in the traffic pattern. Are those the same thing?
So here's where we get into the kind of the dynamics of the situation. Let's say there's 5 aircraft currently in the traffic pattern and one is making a full stop landing. Well, within the next probably less than a minute, that aircraft will then have removed itself from the mathematical equation, so then there's only 4. So this is what this is really targeting. Let's say we have 7 people who've come here specifically to do touch and goes. So at any given moment in that, let's say, half-hour period, there's 7 people in the pattern. So that's what we're trying to discourage.
Right. So what this would be doing if the city decided to move forward would be discouraging the touch and go operations when there are 5 or more aircraft in a traffic pattern.
Specifically, yes.
Right. Those, because that sounds very different from when there are 5 operators doing, or 5 touch and go operations happening at any given time. I don't even know how that would be possible to measure.
So that's an excellent
You
point.
wouldn't have
How would
5
you-
touch and goes literally happening at the same time. So we're talking about the pattern.
In the pattern,
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Oh, scroll. Got you. Thank you. All right. So a little more additional information on the saturated pattern policy. It would be communicated to pilots various methods that are outlined in our communications plan, which we'll go over in detail also here in a little bit. If the City Council gives direction to move forward with the saturated pattern policy, we will have to go to the FAA with that. It's just kind of a matter of a little bit of paperwork. We do have to submit policies such like that, like our voluntary noise abatement procedures, to the FAA. And then council direction, would you like to implement a voluntary saturated pattern policy to increase airfield safety?
I have a question going back to, actually, Councilman Popkin made me think about it. When you have 5 airplanes, one comes down, but someone else from another airport gets in that pattern because they flew here.
Okay.
How do we know? But the 5th one now is taking off. So now you have 6, maybe 6 or 7 in that. Because even though they didn't take off here, they got in the pattern.
And so now we get more to the dynamics and the interesting, how do you judge this? How do you How do you grade this? It certainly becomes difficult. So I suppose the best way to answer this question is that there are times when will be obvious. Well, there'll be, like I mentioned, 7 people in the pattern, and pilots communicate with each other on the radios. They know they're going to hear there's person on the upwind, downwind, base, final, and stuff like that. So they'll be able to determine, it's like, okay, this is getting crowded for people doing touch and goes here. So the tracking, the monitoring of this would be more difficult. It is, it's a voluntary thing. So it's mostly, from my standpoint, it's something that I can go to flight schools with and say, look, here's what we're shooting for. So put this in the, when you're doing your trainings, when guys are coming to the airport, when they're hearing 5 or plus people, in the traffic pattern, they should be hopefully reacting. They should be thinking to themselves, okay, hey, this is a saturated pattern. This is the policy. We should look for an alternative.
And what if they don't?
It would be a voluntary procedure. So again, it gets back to what we can do, what we can outreach, what we can educate, to try to convince them that it's a good idea.
Okay. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. Levi, how often does that level of planes in that type of pattern, hit that 6, 7? Is it once a day? Is it mainly on the weekends? What's the...
Well, and again, our peak times of operation actually aren't on the weekends. They're actually between Tuesday and Thursday. Okay. So that's kind of where I would look for that. I would say it occurs. I haven't seen examples, and again, monitoring the traffic, at times 7 planes in the pattern or so, or right around there. So it's conceivable that of those 5, we're doing touch and goes and stuff like. So it occurs, and I think it's reasonable to say that would be something that we would want to discourage for safety reasons.
Well, yes, of course, but it seems like a very saturated pattern at that point. Even 5 seems somewhat saturated, but it's a little hard. Are you suggesting at some point here, as there is an option of having a non-manned tower, that there was some sort of electronic tower or some sort of thing like that option.
We're getting into the discussion of remote towers. Is what
Remote
they're referred
towers,
to.
yeah.
That's actually technology that's not quite been vetted out by the FAA yet or really approved on a wide scale. So I'd say that's something would be a conversation to have in the future.
And so, also, what would something like this look like if you were to talk to them in the? Would you say, you know, so and so in Cessna, you know, number whatever? Did you you're joining a saturated pattern already? Is that what your notification to them is going to be?
So that's something that the FAA has been rather clear about. It's not like we can call them on the radio and tell them not to come in.
No, I mean, but just say you're entering a saturated pattern. You can't give them any information.
We can't. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just their ability to count the planes.
It would be a policy, and
in the sky.
Yeah, the operating pilots would certainly have that ability to know what's going on up there in the pattern.
Okay.
Councilmember McCoy, could I also answer a little bit of your question, and Mayor Peck as well? So the benefit to the pilots, and this is something that the Airport Advisory Board Chair and I were chatting about, the benefit to the pilots, of course, is that you can then get into the pattern also, right? If we're telling people that you can't just keep going and with your touch and go, sometimes you got to stop and let somebody else onto the ride. That means that there's other people that get to be part of that pattern, and that flow is a little more safe. You had asked about 5 planes versus 2 planes versus, I think we heard Public Invited to be Heard give you all some suggestions. Rifle is the airport that we're patterning this after. Their saturated pattern policy is for 5 planes, and we're not really aware of other ones that are close by that are doing this. So we just patterned it after that. Yeah.
Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you, Levi and Sandy, for your work on this. Is a pattern a static oval? Is a pattern a static shape? I mean, I've seen pictures of that. And we've had some conversations back and forth. I'm like, who's outside the pattern? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Is it a static thing?
It's not. It's incredibly dynamic, and it depends on winds, it depends on weather, it depends on the aircraft operating. So, for example, we often hear this, and it's taught to pilots. Is the standard pattern is half a mile to a mile from the runway center line. Well, that's true as long as you're operating a smaller single engined airplane. Now, if you're operating a multi-engine aircraft, that pattern is going to be a mile to a mile and a half. So there's all kinds of variety in that pattern that can affect things.
So, some of the concerns that we've been hearing from residents is that someone's flying outside the pattern. It sounds like that's both valid and not valid at the same time, in that, like, it's different from what the standard, like, from the expectation that has been set, but, like, it's also a dynamic, it's a dynamic adjustment. And so, like, I think that's set up some situations where there's unfair expectations, perhaps to no fault of the resident here because of what's been set. But how close, like, what is the goal of what is the objective of a pattern?
The objective of a pattern is to create an organized method in which pilots can enter an area, an airport area, and land safely. So
as a pattern more dynamically expands, is that a result of more air traffic in that pattern?
Most generally, it is a result of more air traffic, or it could be a result of visibility conditions. More likely, it's a result of wind or something like that. And again, then there are some instances where it gets down to pilot experience and stuff like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you for
Absolutely.
that clarification. So, you mentioned the process here of if we wanted to move forward with this, council will give direction, and then there would be conversations with the FAA.
Yeah.
Do those conversations with the FAA enable certain enforcement mechanisms? Like if we're having to talk to them anyway, does that open the door to have hey, how can we kind of hold folks to this? Because I understand the value. I see some value in allowing you to now be going to neighboring airports and flight schools and say, hey, we're setting this parameter now of that we really, really want you to respect because it's creating some issues if we don't. And we want to have as safe operations as possible for our airspace and our airfield. I can see some value, but I also see the frustration where that is not, there's no teeth.
And regarding some of the kind of the details into that, I would direct you back to kind of the guidance we got last November from legal counsel. Kind of the short answer to that is there's really tight kind of control the federal government has over aircraft operating in the air, and that would be a flight operation.
Sure. So now that you're talking to the FAA though about flight operations, like what do they? If you said, hey, we're having a lot of air traffic, and maybe Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar is going to enlighten us more on like the exact data on amount of air traffic that we've seen and the trends there.
Mm-hmm.
But you're having this conversation with the regulatory agency.
Mm-hmm.
Can they help implement this?
So implement what specifically?
Saturated pattern policy.
They can give us guidance on how they feel about it, seeing as it's a voluntary thing. That I don't see too much pushback from them on saying that they dislike it, especially if we kind of pursued, for the reason that it is for safety.
Sure. So I'm hearing that there's kind of it came from the Airport Advisory Board. I wanted to make sure that council had a chance to discuss this. At the same time, I'm hearing from residents they're skeptical of this. I'm hearing from pilots that they're skeptical of this. So I guess, what is this ultimately in service of? What is the tool this actually gives you?
So what this essentially gives us is another item that we can take, another item we can use for education for pilots to potentially help with issues at the airport.
And would that education also include kind of publicizing that on airfield directories and making sure folks understand that, hey, we are setting a guardrails effectively of what we would appreciate seeing here for safer operations.
And that would be the second part of our presentation.
Got it. Okay. And then I guess
let's hear the rest of this.
Sorry, it sounded like we had stopped. So sorry,
Yes.
apologies. I will hold then.
Okay.
Yes, and Mayor and Council, this is a stop point because we're going to move on to a different topic. So if you would like to pass forward the saturated pattern policy, you could do that now. We could just keep going with our presentation and you could pick it back up at the end. I certainly understand the frustration, and you're 100% right. I mean, even if we implement a saturated pattern policy, we have no enforcement abilities. It is a voluntary piece. But I think what we're trying to then go out and tell people is, hey, people are upset about the traffic. They're upset about what's going on and all the different touch and goes. And it's important for you to know that and to know that there's something you can do about it. And to be able to advertise that in our communication channels. And so as Levi just mentioned, we're going to talk about the VNAP because we're going to use the same communication channels, and you'll see that whole list here in just a second around how we would communicate a saturated pattern policy. It's a balance. We could certainly ask the FAA when we consult with them, any ideas? But I don't think we're the only airport that's dealing with this kind of an issue by far.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry.
Thank you, Mayor. No, we're not. I attended when Commissioner Stoltzman and Representative Brown did the presentation on the leaded fuel. And no, I mean, we're hearing it from all directions. I guess for me, I understand that it was recommended by the Airport Advisory Board and just trying to come with solutions. But I'm wondering, because it doesn't have any teeth, is it really going to make a difference? And the efforts being put out to throw out this whole new policy, is it going to help? And, I can wait for that answer if there are other pieces in this presentation that will help kind of guide my decision-making process.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, the reality is we won't know until we implement it and try.
Okay.
I'm
willing to try. I'm willing to try and have that open line of communication. I think that's key.
Yeah.
I think to some of the questions, it really is based on the pilot community
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how they're interfacing with each other on the radio as you get into these saturated events, and then feedback we're getting from other pilots in terms of what's happening in the system. There is some self-accountability that I think this does create, because it at least creates a conversation with the people that are in the pattern.
Okay.
And what's happening, because beneath this, I think you're also hearing, if you have multiple people doing touch and goes, when can people take off who are on the airport, or when do they get into the landing pattern? And so if you're at a towered airport, the tower is limiting that access so that people can take off and people can land and when people can come in. This is a non-towered airport, and I think that's the distinction of which the FAA still has control over everything in the air. And I think that's the tension in this. So I think it's putting accountability and responsibility on the pilots community to hold each other accountable as we're implementing this voluntary policy.
I have a, Councilor Yarbrough.
Mayor, you can go.
No, go.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I guess my question will be is, since we cannot, we really don't have a lot of control over enforcing this policy, and we have this hopes and expectation that pilots will listen to one another and we will start talking to them. Why can't we do all of that now? Since we know we can't enforce this, we don't know if the enforcement is possible. So why are we not spending the time talking to pilots, educating them, bringing them together, and informing them how important this is? Because our emails are inundated with people who are very upset, who thinks we are doing nothing.
So again, that's the second part of the presentation.
Okay.
So before we move on, my question is, oh, were you finished?
Depending on your question.
Just kidding. In your research with Rifle, how long have they had this policy and has it made a difference?
They've had it for about a year and a half. I didn't ask them specifically on whether they had felt they made a difference. I did ask them when it was last time they implemented it. They said that last time they was last summer when they had fire operations there. So to my understanding, they haven't used it a whole lot yet. Rifle also has significantly less traffic than we do. So I'm not quite sure what their motivation for doing the policy was either. But it sounds like they don't have a whole lot of particularly specific experience utilizing it at the moment.
Well, I don't think that's a good airport to follow up on. They don't have any data. Oh, Councilor Yarbrough.
I'm sorry. I didn't turn it off.
You're fine. No, I turned it off.
Okay, so are you looking for a decision right now? Because I want to list. I think I want to see the rest of everything.
It does sound like that would be helpful.
Yes,
We can do that,
Okay.
certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can revisit it here. All right. All right. Voluntary noise abatement
Wait,
procedures.
I'm sorry. I want to have an answer on that data from Rifle, because we're basing a lot of stuff on Rifle.
Well, they're the only ones that have the pattern policy
In
right
Colo-
now.
in
the
Colorado.
area, in Colorado. Yeah.
So I did speak with them, and the kind of the gist of what I got was I said, hey, this, that, and they're like, well, this and that. So the data is probably not quite black and white is kind of what came back from that.
So a question here, because I talked to the airport manager at Rifle, and they do actively use this. Just maybe not like he didn't actively say like we shut down things like you just said once for the firefighting operations. That sounds like a very different type of operation altogether. And so, which I'm sure we would do if there was a firefighting operation happening in like Lyons, right? That would be a very different type of situation than what we're talking about here. Because when I had a conversation with the airport manager, he said, yeah, he's hopping on the radio every now and then when they know that they're having a lot of diversions from the Aspen airport and they're having a bunch of planes coming into land, they're getting on there and asking to withhold touch and goes for those things. It didn't sound like that was once in a summer. I'm curious what, like maybe if we decide to think about this moving forward, that feels like useful information for us to understand how it's operationalized, not just the data of like the instances that are tracked specifically.
So I would caution doing what he recommended there. So during my conversations with him on the phone, one thing I did ask him, I said, well, what did the FAA say when you told them about your idea for your policy? And they said, well, what do you mean we didn't run it by the FAA? And one thing that the FAA specifically told me in the past is I can't get on the radio to do that. They would consider that no bueno. So again, now we're getting more into legal questions where we might want additional counsel to talk about the legalities of stuff like that. But I would caution that that's things that we have been told that we cannot do.
And Councilmember Popkin, we could certainly go to the FAA before you make the decision to bring back any feedback that they have, if that's something that would be helpful, and we can clarify the answer to that question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
hold. All right.
You can move on.
Voluntary noise abatement procedure. So there's been a lot of talk about voluntary noise abatement procedure. I thought I'd go into it in a little bit more detail, just so everyone kind of understands of, what we have, what it really is, and then how we communicate it to people and stuff like that, and what we are doing to outreach to the pilots. We have a very robust, long-lived noise abatement procedure here at the airport. I mean, there's a few other airports in Colorado that have had ones about the same length or longer. Centennial comes to mind. So Longmont has one for quite a while. It consists of a long list. In fact, we have one of the more comprehensive voluntary noise abatement programs in the state of things that we actively and regularly communicate to pilots on kind of how we would like them to fly here to help us with the issues that we have. All this information is found on our website in various locations. Did I skip a page? All right. All right. All right. Go. Oh, that's right. Video up. All right.
All right. So Mayor Peck and members of council, I really had a lot of questions about this because I see all the emails that come into you that say, you have to do something about this. Well, what can be done about noise when it comes to airplanes? And so I wasn't sure either. I actually helped create that airport website when we redid the web and still wasn't totally sure. So Levi actually found this great 1 minute, 30-second video that I'd like to show you that really talks about what could pilots do? What can they do to actually make noise less when they're flying? So I would like to show this to you. Okay.
KBJC Aviation Community at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport.
Ooh, that's quiet. So it's real quiet, but you can read it as we go.
During the day. We hope you find it informative and valuable. Did you know that flight training and noise reduction can go hand in hand? As aviators in the Colorado area, we're committed to not only providing a place for training the next generation of pilots, but also being good neighbors to our community. Here's how flight schools in the area are balancing safe and effective training with noise-conscious practices every day. During the day, flight training operations are directed by Air Traffic Control, also known as ATC. They ensure that pilots navigate airspace near the surrounding areas safely and efficiently. Flight school adheres to airspace restrictions, which define where they can practice maneuvers. Some of the surrounding flight schools recently adjusted these sites to help reduce noise impact on the community. During the day, those who are conducting flight training are working to implement various procedures to help minimize noise impact on the community. For instance, when approaching for landing, the aircraft maintain a higher glide path to reduce noise when it's safe to do so. Additionally, they aim to train pilots to lower RPMs when appropriate to further decrease noise levels. As aviators in the Colorado area, we're committed to balancing effective pilot training with responsible noise management. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for indulging me on that. I didn't have any idea what pilots could actually do to make things quieter. I didn't realize they could reduce their RPMs, that they could do different glide paths. I think there's a lot of conversation about what is the path, right? What is this pattern that we keep talking about? And so what can be done? So I just wanted to share with you that there are some things that pilots can do and do as part of the request that we have for volunteer noise abatement. So I know some folks have said, well, is it working? Like, you get all these emails. Is it working? Is our volunteer noise abatement procedures working? Well, Airport Monitoring Systems, who is the system that actually tracks the flights that are coming into the Longmont Airport, can do an audit. They've offered their services to be able to do an audit to let us know, is this working or is it not working? They're willing to do some community involvement as well with neighbors to try to assess and figure out what are the best patterns that people can use, kind of the next step in the volunteer noise abatement process. So I just wanted to mention that to you. The cost that they've proposed is between $9,000 and $18,000, depending on what kinds of things we would want to do with it. But it does exist. There are ways that we can assess it. I'm not sure that we could assess it right at this minute, but it may be something worth taking a look at. So I'm going to turn it back to Levi because this is his list of all the things he does to communicate the volunteer noise abatement process. If you were to choose to move forward with the saturated pattern policy, we would also follow the same communication patterns for that.
All right, this information comes from a document called our communications plan. So we have the voluntary noise abatement procedure, which is, I won't sit here and bore you with a giant long list of what's on that. Most of it's technical pilot stuff involving RPMs and altitudes and stuff like that that would take a great deal of explanation and it isn't really applicable to the conversation currently. This, however, is the communication plan. So this is essentially what we're doing to get that information out specifically to the pilots. I'll add one more thing that's not on this list. Over the course of the last year, we've started doing Front Range Regional Flight School voluntary noise abatement procedure meetings. So we've actually been having great success. I'm getting the flight schools in the regions, the majority, if not all of them, together in the same room to talk about voluntary noise abatement procedures at the various airports. Fortunately, most of the various airports have very similar voluntary noise abatement procedures, so it's kind of an easy thing to coordinate. One thing that we do highlight in those meetings is the differences between airports and what particular procedures each one has. Our communication plan, which can also be found online if anyone would like to go get a hard copy of it, details everything we do. So we distribute distribute to resident flight schools and fixed base operators. So I do that on whenever it changes or on a yearly basis. So it occurs regularly. We'd have various posters around the flight school, around my office, around the FBO that lists out everything on the voluntary noise abatement procedure that are posted in plain sight everywhere. We have a regular newsletter. Whenever we do a newsletter, we always direct pilots to our voluntary noise abatement procedure. We have, they're published in various digital formats that you can access online and download that you can put in your phone, your tablet, your electronic flight book, stuff like that. So we do have digital copies that pilots can keep with them also. We publish in the chart supplement. The chart supplement is a document that the vast majority of pilots should, if they do not, reference whenever they fly to another airport, that we have voluntary noise abatement procedures and where to find information on those procedures. We were one of the few airports that actually has signs on our airfield guiding pilots to our voluntary noise abatement procedures. So at the end of each runway, we actually have signs that talk about our voluntary noise abatement procedures and guiding the pilots to them too. We do have a blurb on our AWOS about our voluntary noise abatement procedure. Point of clarification, that AWOS is accessed via radio frequency by pilots, not via phone line, and can also be accessed via internet. Any switching?
Oh, but that's a good question. Any questions on the communication plan?
Councilor Popkin.
When you say distributed to flight schools, a lot of the feedback that we are hearing is that it's the flight schools who are the worst offenders. I don't know, like that, like maybe that's something that you're going to myth bust or fact check for us or let us know, like if that's true. It sounds like that's the case. I look at the flight radar sometimes and I do see a lot coming up from RMMA and doing the pattern and going back. And so that seems to check those boxes. What does that mean when you say distributed to flight schools? How are you following up with the flight schools to ensure that they're actually communicating that clearly to the student pilots?
So,
and that their instructors understand what they're talking about for different airports.
So, for example, and this has been made exponentially easier since we've started doing these quarterly voluntary noise abatement procedure meetings with the flight schools, because we finally get them all in one room, right? So I just take a big giant stack of our voluntary noise abatement procedure, and we go there, and they go around the table, and every airport talks about their voluntary noise abatement procedure. Everyone hands out their thing. They highlight changes and differences. They highlight areas that they're concerned and stuff like that. So that's the basic procedures. Does that answer your question?
How often are those meetings?
Those are quarterly.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that all of the different airports highlight their different procedures. Is there a lot of variation between them that it's like complicated for different pilots to, like if they come and go and do a pattern up here and then they go over to Greeley and then they go back to RMMA, like are they memorizing 15,000 different things?
And that's an excellent question, and this is where we're getting in a little bit perhaps opinion here instead of but I would say from my exposure to it, from going through it, they're very similar. There's most common sense voluntary noise abatement procedures are they're the same for every airport. So there's basic things, like reduce RPM when able. Don't keep full power in the pattern, stuff like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, stuff like that. So for the most part, we're just seeing like little differences. For example, Boulder has a specific neighborhoods around the airport where they essentially ask pilots to change the entry route into the pattern and put potential stuff like that up. Rocky Mountain Metro, while they're ATC, so they kind of just got to do whatever ATC does there.
Yeah,
sorry.
I got that one. Are you from your vantage point, since your office is at the airport, are you able to get a sense of like how? I'm not asking for the exact data here, obviously, but like from your anecdotal experience and more than anecdotal, your frequent experience and perception there, can you tell when someone is reducing the RPM versus not?
That's a hard question. Usually, if you're sitting out there, I would say from my office is a bad example because there's so many buildings that block it. But sitting out on the end of the runway,
if you're at Flight Deck Grill, can you?
Yeah,
tell?
there we go. It's you can usually tell if someone is or is not. I would say again, the vast majority of pilots are they're doing these for safety reasons anyway, and that kind of rolls into the voluntary noise abatement procedure with just some minor attention to detail and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question. I hear from pilots who are locally based that they know exactly kind of where to navigate to avoid particular conflict areas in the community and to kind of fly a thoughtful, respectful pattern. How is that conveyed? And I also hear from multiple perspectives that like that is not a consistent thing that's happening, especially from pilots who don't know kind of the general community context, which makes sense. If I'm driving into a new community, I'm going to like navigate the roads differently than someone who like lives there every day.
Okay. My first thought is, we have a standardized traffic pattern, so I guess I'd want some more clarification on specifically with the.
I presume it would be the direction of coming into the pattern or out of the pattern or kind of deviating from when they're like leaving the pattern to go in a certain direction or two. That'd be my.
Yeah, that's I suppose that would take a little bit more study to see what the specific complaint on that one was.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Anything additional? Okay.
One more switcheroo.
Right, gotcha.
Okay. Councilmember Popkin, I do understand what you're saying as far as we do have pilots who try very hard to be thoughtful of the neighborhoods that are around them. And most of them probably are fixed base. And so when you're right, when visitors are coming in, maybe they don't understand. Of course, that's why we try to post it everywhere. But, but you're right that may be the population that is creating some of the issues for the neighborhoods. But it's hard to tell without an audit to know exactly. So as I mentioned, I've had the privilege of working closely with Levi over the last 6 months and receiving council complaints about the airport for the last 27 years. And so I thought, there's a couple things that I was really curious about and wanted to find out more information about. So one of them is one that Councilmember Popkin and I talked about. We would get a complaint from somebody who would show us their flight tracking system from their phone, their free app that's tracking a flight. Levi would look at it, and it looks like it is in two different places. They would say, look at this. This is way outside of the pattern. And then Levi would look at the one from AMS, and it looks like a totally different thing, same plane. So while we had our representative from AMS on the phone the other day, I said, why is that? Why do different flight trackers show the same exact plane in two different places? And he said, well, it depends whether the flight tracker is accounting for barometric pressure. And so if the free flight trackers aren't tuned that way, they're going to show a different location than the ones that we have at the airport. I thought that is fascinating. So it's really about, kind of the altitude and where people are. So I had never heard that, but I thought it was an interesting point because I was like, why does it look different? It looks different because of how the flight trackers are tuned. I've also heard from people that the airport traffic has doubled. I've actually heard airport traffic has doubled since Levi started. Is that true? And so I went through and looked at some of the traffic information from AMS. And we do have a lot of flights. I put here on this slide, the information that they gave me was September to August. And so when I looked, there was 119,000 flights that were in that first year in 2023. In 2024, that September to August, 130 flights. But that's an increase of 9.05. It's not a double. It's also not nothing. You know, it's 9%. How can I find out information about the airport? I heard this an awful lot. Levi puts together a really great newsletter for folks, and the public doesn't necessarily have access to it. So we have put in a sign-up form out there on the website, both on the airport page as well as the communications page, so that you can actually sign up for the airport newsletter. If you're a resident or you're just interested or you like planes or you don't like planes, you can find out what's happening at Vance Brand by signing up for the newsletter. We also changed where you can complain about things that are happening, because it was kind of, I think people have mentioned that was a little bit hidden. So it's now a giant blue button on the airport page, so that if people have concerns and want to put those out there, that they can do so more easily. I certainly heard tonight the concerns about using lead fuel, and I did watch that video. Allie sent it to me, and I watched the presentation afterwards. It was very interesting, I thought. But what's the airport doing about the leaded fuel? Well, it's kind of tough because, you know, as I think was mentioned, 2030 is the goal that has been laid out by the federal government. So to some extent, that's out of our hands. However, the state of Colorado has asked us to create an unleaded fuel transition plan by January of this next year. So we'll be doing that. We will be applying for the CDOT grants as recommended by the City Council to see if we can make that transition as easy as possible. But certainly we can't force it either. It's not something that we can force pilots to be able to stop using leaded fuel.
Yeah, and I think part of that, so when we talked about this the last time with the attorneys present, there was mention of an airport that said you can no longer have leaded fuel. And I think they talked about the fact that they were actually in a Part 16 with the FAA. They lost the Part 16 with
And
the
just clarify,
FAA.
what's a Part 16? We got this from a resident the other day.
So there's two ways that the FAA can come at you in terms of if you're violating their rules, regulations, or grant assurances. One's a Part 13, which is more of an informal process. A Part 16 is the formal process that you go through. We were actually involved in one of those when we created the use fees on the undeveloped portion of the south side of the airport, and it took us about 3 or 4 years to get through the Part 16 process. We were in, I think, over $200,000 in cost. We ended up winning it, but that's the regulatory process that you go through. So in that case, when a Part 16 is decided on a topic that is very particular and the FAA's made the decision, it's almost like legal precedent from the Supreme Court when you're looking at what rules they're going to enforce and how you have to do it. There's also litigation outside of it. So then you will see litigation show itself in different courts. You know, there was a case here where there was a private lawsuit against Mile High Skydiving 6 or so years ago that was in Boulder County courts. Mile High Skydiving actually won that case. Recently, the city of Boulder had a case with the FAA in terms of the question of not taking grants and closing the airport. Chris gave me an update, essentially, and you can jump in. They said it's not ripe because you haven't got to that point yet. But yeah, you are required to keep the airport open for the 20 years after the last grant. And we're not sure whether or not you're going to be able to close it even at that point, because one of the grants that they received is actually for the acquisition of land. But we'll decide that in 20 more years. So as we're moving through all of these situations, you have FAA grant assurances, you have Part 13s, Part 16s, you have court decisions in this. And honestly, what's behind this is what I'm hearing is that this is occurring across the United States. And so the FAA is not looking at it as, well, here's this problem at this airport, here's this problem here. They're also looking at it, well, if this occurs here, what's the impact to the national system that they're regulating, and so they are being more aggressive in terms of managing these issues than they have historically because of the impact. In that, if they allow something to occur here, everyone starts trying to do it, and now they're chasing these across the United States, and that's what gets into the supremacy clause that's really guiding a lot of these requirements.
Thanks, Harold. The other point I just wanted to make is, why are there so many flight schools that are training? Like, what is happening? Because that didn't seem to be a thing a few years ago. And the answer is that there is a pilot shortage right now. And so I did a little research, and, certainly Boeing has been out there saying that global air travel demand is outpacing the economic growth, and the markets have stayed stagnant. And so they're estimating actually that there's going to need to be, 660,000 new pilots, new maintenance crews, cabin crews over the next 20 years. And so it's, even though that's, I think people are like, why are these flight schools continuing to train so much? Why are there so many people there? And it's because there is a pilot shortage nationally.
Just a short, quick question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So just really quick, when you mentioned the newsletter, could you have, and I'm going to volunteer have council also receive that? So as things come up to us and we hear from residents, we could just kick that out to them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. No problem. I think Levi does a really good job of updating people on everything from, what's happening around the Airport Advisory Board and with City Council and some of these policies, all the way to, hey, the gate's been broken for a little while because a mouse got in there and chewed up the wires. I think it's a really nice newsletter, and so I would be happy to send that to the City Council also.
So I saw Levi's face when with that question, so I'm kind of wondering, what is your thought on that, Levi?
Oh, yeah. We certainly can. I was.
You look a
actually-
bit confused.
Oh, I was under the impression that everyone was already getting it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay. I'll double check that.
Okay.
All right.
Make sure.
And Sandy, just for curiosity, I know that you did the, what is this called? You measured from September to August in 2023, the flights to 2024. And I would be curious before 2023, because it's not just because Levi's the manager.
Right.
I want to know, did the pandemic have something to do with it? Did other things other than Rocky Mountain Airport? There are other influences.
Yeah, we can certainly go back with more data. I just happened to
at
see
some
the
point.
presentation and
Yeah.
was like, oh, I want to see those numbers. I'm curious, like, how many more
Exactly.
flights are there? People say it's doubled. It hasn't doubled.
Well, I'm not sure they think it's doubled in a year. They may think it's doubled
Over
since
5 years.
2019
Yeah.
or something. So,
Yep, happy to bring back some more information.
thank you very
because I'm
much.
sure we have that data.
Councilor Popkin?
Yeah, thank you. Do we have a sense, I hear flight schools, I hear the meetings that we're having with the flight schools. Do we have a sense of how many flight schools were actually, what the universe of flight schools are in terms of numbers that actually interact with us? I'm not thinking individual planes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the number of actual schools.
Generally speaking, approximately 5. And then again, when you get into the nit and gritty of it, maybe a flight school's coming here on a long cross country from Nebraska. You can never get down to it for the fine brass tacks of absolutely every flight that possibly comes here. But no, about 5.
Okay. I have a list of more than 5, and so I'll maybe send that to you after, and we can discuss that. But
Okay.
feels like
Yeah.
quite a significant number there in just the Front Range of Colorado.
Mhm.
How many do we have based at KLMLO?
1 in all practicality Aerosphere. Lead Aviation also has a small operation, which they kind of call a flight school, but really it's aircraft rental.
Okay. And then my last question on the fuels. We had some comments today on unleaded and unleaded fuels. I know we've had some initial discussions about like electrical infrastructure for electrification longer term. Is that coming back later this month when we're talking about kind of fuel incentives and other things, or is that like where is that in the consideration? Because I know that's not part of today's presentation, but I just wanted to
With electrification? and-
electrification on just anything like ideally informing the transition plan to unleaded fuels, which could be either sustainable aviation fuels that are commercially
Yeah.
available or electrified aircraft.
And that's something, the transition plan is something we're currently working on. We have some meetings later this month set up, some interviews with the city to start fleshing that out, and that will be due to CDOT on January 1st. So that plan itself is still under works.
Sure.
That specific transition plan via the requirements of the Colorado Department of Transportation will be focused primarily on how we're specifically switching from leaded fuel to an unleaded alternative. So it'll be highly focused on that. When we start having the conversations about electrification and stuff like that, that's a broader topic that I would put to the Airport Advisory Board or certainly to this board.
So
But I
we're
think we have
having those
direction.
conversations with LPC, and I think this is where we've heard investment at the airport, and I think when we showed you all the budget, there's no money. And so typically in airports, the airport is the developer, and they're funding the infrastructure they're putting on site to support the development at the airport. I've had conversations with David and Daryl thinking about what do we need from the standpoint of LPC, and is there a way that the airport can facilitate that, so that do we have options in terms of bringing electrical infrastructure on site, but we have to do that in accordance with our financial policies related to fund accounting and what we can do, because one can't support the other. And so it's really understanding the nuance and the financial details, because the airport can't give LPC free land unless LPC does something for the development of the airport. The LPC can't put electric infrastructure on the airport unless they're getting something in return based on our financial policies and fund accounting processes. And then the question is, what do we need in that area as we look at the broader area in terms of development and growth of the electric capacity in the area? So those are conversations we had. Daryl's looking at it. It needs to be brought in with the work that Levi's doing in terms of what that looks like.
Harold, I would also mention that we have council direction on this to pursue all these pieces.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure that we had planned necessarily, unless you would like for us to bring back any of that information. We will have a plan completed and submitted to the state by January 1st. We will continue to apply for the grants because you asked us. You asked us to.
Great. So if I could summarize all of that very briefly here, it sounds like there is a transition plan to get towards to an unleaded fuel transition plan by the start of the new year. Then the question will be, how do we implement that, and what funding do we have to implement that, both from a commercially available sustainable aviation fuel refueling or fueling station option, and what incentives we have there or fees we charge there, and what electrification technologies do we have that are starting to attract electric aircraft as appropriate. In some ways, that in of itself is an investment in the airport longer term too, because we're investing in more sustainable, just quieter engines, like healthier, sustainable engines overall. So that is an investment in the future of aviation here. The question is what's that longer term implementation strategy, and how do we fund that? Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So I do want to go ahead and go through the next steps. So one thing is, we presented some financial information to you a couple weeks ago as part of the budget process. And as we started to look at the pro formas, we realized a couple things, like the airport fund has no reserve. And so Harold asked us to look into adding a 90-day reserve to the airport fund. Also, rather than talking about a 10-year CIP process, kind of shortening that to 7 years, because it seems a little long to try to amortize over 10 years. So we will have updated information that we'll be providing to the Airport Advisory Board. Of course, as you can guess, that probably doesn't help the financial picture, but it does at least give us some more clarity on what that really looks like. So I wanted for you to know that we're updating those pro formas to try to include some of those things.
All right, let me jump in real quick on the 90-day reserve. When we look at reserve policies, we take different things into consideration. So I'm going to give you an example on our reserve policies for our water utility fund. We had a flood. It is highly unlikely that we collect zero revenue at any given point in time in the water fund, because we would have to have our complete system decimated. It is more likely that you have a tornado or high winds hit, and it could strategically hit the entire airport, which in that case, you have a higher likelihood of not having any revenue coming into the system, which means you really need to have a 90-day reserve. And so that was the conversation that we had, that we need to really put that in. This makes our financial gap bigger, both of these, which when we look at why do we need to raise revenue from a landing fee perspective, or why do we need to look at it in terms of our lease rates and other things, this is front and center, getting at the operational dollars that we need for the airport.
Right. And on talking about the fiscal impact to the airport, I would like some kind of a study or analysis on that $73 million that I keep hearing that the airport's bringing in. Where is that information coming from?
Mayor Peck, that came from an economic impact report that came from CDOT. So happy to resend it to y'all if you're interested. Levi
please
just sent
do.
it to me. I thought it was interesting, and it was interesting how, like, the methodology that they used in order to determine that. They also used the IMPLAN system, which is, you know, something where you put in these different inputs and it determines what economic impact is. So happy to resend that to the city council.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's where that number's coming from.
So on IMPLAN, we use IMPLAN.
Yeah.
So we're very familiar with what IMPLAN can produce. When we use IMPLAN on economic development projects that we present to you all, we just don't take the numbers that it spits out, because we do know there's certain categories where IMPLAN can overestimate, and so we actually use practical data and experience that we have to balance it out, because we've just seen it sometimes it can be a really big number, and that's not necessarily reflecting reality.
I would say,
That's
though,
my concern. That's almost like I would wish Longmont would use InPlan to decide our own local rather than CDOT.
Mayor, I would say, though, that they did an awful lot of individual interviews. I mean, they went pretty deep. They didn't just throw in a bunch of numbers and go for it. Like I said, that's something that they provided to us. Happy to resend it to the council.
Perfect. Thank you.
The other thing that we've been talking about is the landing fee options. The reason I tell you that the financial information is being updated is because that is the need for the conversation around landing fees. Landing fees are need to be there for revenue for infrastructure and for airport operations. So the landing fee options will be presented to the next Airport Advisory Board meeting on October 23rd for a final recommendation to council. They did give you a recommendation already, but they didn't have the financial information. So it felt like we should probably give them that financial information so that they could ensure that that was still the recommendation they wanted to make. The landing fee ordinance and recommendations to council will come here November 3rd, then to the November 3rd meeting. And then after that, we'll be bringing the emergency and communication policies, the lease policy, and the effectiveness of the VNAP, depending on whether we're able to do that kind of an audit. So I just wanted to tell you what was coming. Yeah.
Great.
That's all we got tonight. Yeah.
And I just wanted for the public to know that I'm the one that made the motion for the landing fees, and I have no idea that they're going to pay for everything or anything of importance. It is a start of figuring out how do we manage this business, which is the city's. We own it. And we have a right, as we're looking at infrastructure, et cetera. And after 2019, when that last Part 16 was settled, then we hit the pandemic. So we didn't have a lot of time or input into the infrastructure. We're working on it, looking at electrifying electric airplanes and as Harold just mentioned, how do we bring electricity to the airport in the most sustainable way? And so that's why we're doing all this now. It isn't just because of touch and goes. It's because we are now looking at our airport as a business and how do we move forward after everything's been settled. Not that we won't get other lawsuits, but but it's a challenge and we need to face it. We just can't keep not discussing it. So here we are. Now, oh my gosh. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Sandy.
Oh, only if you want to.
Oh,
Yeah, great point.
forgot about that part.
Okay.
Anyone who would like to give direction on this saturation policy? Go for it. Turn on your light. Counselor Popkin.
Yeah, I have one more question before I give direction on this, or offer some thoughts on how we do this. Levi, yeah. We had a brief exchange via email about kind of how to assess kind of a safer level based on the saturation policy. And so I'm curious, like, are 7 planes in a saturation policy safer than 8?
And now we're getting into, this is the beginning of this conversation. This hasn't really been fleshed out. So there isn't really a lot of great data that you can actually, back anything up like number like that up with. So it's a starting point. It's a conversation.
And so what you're saying is this would be, whatever direction council gives would be a starting point for conversation with the FAA, basically, and you guys would.
It's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And so you'd start to have that conversation and figure out, hey, like, what are you comfortable with? How does this help achieve your air management goals, and how does this achieve our needs on the airfield or airfield operations? I'm probably butchering some of the terms there, but that's kind of where you would go from this direction.
Yeah, that's logical.
And so then there's no perfectly safe number. Like there's no immaculately safe number, right?
Not that I can imagine.
Like
anyway.
ever, right? Like short of like 0 or 1 maybe, and even still that something can go wrong by accident, right? So there were the two Florida airports that we discussed as well had a saturation policy threshold of 3, I believe, and.
So I gave them a call. I want to say Valkyrie has 3 and D-Land actually has 6. And I informed them that their policy actually says 3 on the website, and they said they didn't know how that happened. So one has 3 and one does have 6.
It says it's 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it says okay. Well, I'm working off of what it said. I realize that implementation is going to be a bit of a challenge. I'd love to hear from FAA on how they can be a partner in this, ideally. Because I think if we're trying to just kind of manage our operations a little bit more tightly here, I guess I'll put on the table a saturation policy of 3 to start as a starting point for the conversation, either for council or with the FAA.
I am going to say that I got 2 answers when I asked for the data, none and some. So I would like to have data on an airport our size, a city our size, that have had the saturation policy for a while. I want to know if it works, the VNAP. Well, well, I don't mean the noise. Let's call it
just
a voluntary
saturated
saturation policy.
pattern policy.
Yeah.
See if
Is
we
it working at all? And because this is a road that we're going down, and we don't know. So that's all I see. Oh, Councilor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. Refresh my memory. What did the Airport Advisory Board suggest?
The Airport Advisory Board recommended adding a saturated pattern policy of 5 aircraft during touch and goes for the airport.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Popkin again?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. If I recall the August meeting specifically, I think the AAB recommended that council consider the concept of a saturation pattern policy. I think 5 was tossed out there, but that we either come back to them or go to FAA, figure out how council wants to handle that. And so I think to be fair to all of the AAB members who are contributing to that conversation, I don't think there was a board consensus as to this is the exact perfect policy that we want to recommend. It was more we want the council to take up that concept and then figure out how we want to go from there.
Okay, and we could always go back and check the minutes too.
I just wanted to, thank you.
Counselor, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, so I'd be willing to move forward on having discussions with FAA or even moving forward on a saturation pattern policy of 3. And then, so I guess the first step would be prior to just implementing this, you would need to have those conversations with FAA to determine, and with legal, to determine if this is the direction we can go. Is that
I mean,
the
I would
process?
highly
That would be
recommend
the
involving
process.
them in the
Yes, so we don't have to make a motion to have that be part of the process. It will be part of the process. Is that correct? Am I understanding that
Yeah.
correctly?
Mayor Pro Tem, the
Okay.
difference is just whether you want to say, we'd like to implement a saturated pattern policy of 3, and we take that to the FAA and talk about it, or whether your direction is for us to go to the FAA and determine what might be the best and bring it back.
Okay.
So it's your call. I mean, it's your motion to direct the city manager at this point, which way you want to go.
I think it's Councilmember Popkins' motion.
Well, I mean, you as a council, not. Sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll decide when to second it.
Yeah, I think it's better to start with some specificity, so when we go to the FAA, there's a specific conversation versus, well, what do you think about this and what's the right number? Because then I think the likelihood of us getting into a spin cycle is pretty high.
Yeah.
Versus if we can go in with a targeted number and have the conversation, we're more likely to get more direct answers.
And I'm going to ask, before I call on anybody else, to please not make this a 45-minute discussion. Because I'm not going to vote to go past 11 for anybody. Counselor.
limit on 2 per
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a limit.
There is in our council.
5 and 3. So we have the motion, the second. Let's just vote. And that motion is to draft a saturated pattern policy. No, that's not it. Did you put the motion up here? No.
To direct, no, it's not on here.
That's not on there. Hang on, I'll get it. Oh, darn it. Where did it go?
To direct staff to begin discussions.
Can you bring it up again?
It's not on her screen. Oh, here, maybe here?
No.
No?
No.
Here, it's right here. To direct staff to bring discussions.
Read it. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you. To direct staff to bring discussions for a saturated pattern policy at 3. And it was moved by Councilmember Popkin and seconded by the Mayor Peck.
Okay, I vote yes. Because I can't see my screen. And that passes 5-2 with Councilors Christ and Rodriguez opposing. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the research. You did a great job. We are now at Mayor and Council comments. Councilor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to talk about T.G. Lewis. They've said T.G. Lewis was a friend of LPM's and also a friend of pretty much all the candidates in town because he was very good at promoting political discourse and giving candidates a forum for through public media. And anyway, he was killed in an accident. I think that was in September. Yeah. Anyway, his memorial is going to be November 8th at 11 a.m. at St. Bridget's, which I believe is in Frederick, if anybody would like to attend.
I have a couple of things to say. First of all, I want to tell council that I'm going to be missing 2 meetings in the future, which Mayor Pro Tem has already said she would chair. The first one is in October. It's the 28th. Because next week I'm going to bring a resolution to council to see if you will adopt it advocating for RTD to put the Sky Ride to the airport, that it needs to be reinstated. And I am going to go to that meeting October 28th and read that to them. And so that's why I'm missing. And then November 3rd, unfortunately, that's when the, yeah, shoot, we just said it. I'm going to be at a, yeah, I'm going to be at a family reunion in Florida. Not a family reunion, oh my gosh, I'm tired. A family funeral, totally different than a reunion. But that's when the landing fees are going to be brought back. So I want to talk to Harold about that tomorrow. Also, I want to say about scams. I don't know about anybody else, but during this political season, I've been getting email scams from PayPal saying that we owe a lot of money and that they are going to debit your account. And of course, they don't have your account number, so they can't. But look very carefully at the email address and before opening the email. Also, I'm getting online retail outlets such as Amazon and FedEx and UPS have sent me collection letters also. So be very, very careful. They're coming fast. That's all I've got. Mm-hmm. So seeing no one else in the queue, city manager remarks?
Okay, no comments, Mayor, Council.
Okay, and city attorney?
No comments, Mayor.
It's been moved that we adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned. Let's go home.